Welcome to Mystic Realms Recap. Please like, share, and subscribe. Enjoy today's episode.
The sword-drawing arts stressed upon a single word: speed. Perhaps, the might of the sword-drawing arts was inferior to most high-grade profound rank sword skills. But in terms of speed, high-grade profound rank sword skills could only fall far behind. Your sword skill is pretty good, but your strength is completely not on the same level as mine. Before formidable strength, you are unable to stop me. A wisp of disdain appeared on the corners of Xiao Ying's mouth, and coldness leapt up within his eyes. The hand that held his grade 7 spirit sword trembled, and he was about to use his entire strength to directly knock away the grade 7 spirit sword in Duanling Tian's hand, and penetrate Duanling Tian's throat. Is that so? Right at this instant, Duanling Tian moved. His other hand instantly flashed out, and he pointed out a finger that bore through clouds and gave birth to mist. The finishing touch of the dragon's finishing touch. Whoosh! His finger pointed out, and piercing whistling sounds deafened the ears as it pointed out towards Xiao Ying's eyes. The speed of this point wasn't much slower than the sword-drawing arts. Do you think that only you know martial skills other than sword skills? Xiao Ying sneered. His other hand moved as well, abruptly changing into a claw that tore through the sky and grabbed toward Duanling Tian's left hand that Duanling Tian used to point out a finger with. Duanling Tian started laughing. Although Xiao Ying was slightly astonished when he saw the smile that suddenly appeared on Duanling Tian's face, but his claw strike still fiercely descended, grabbing out at Duanling Tian, wanting to hold on to Duanling Tian's left hand, then used the sword in his right hand to exert force and penetrate Duanling Tian's throat. He wasn't able to do two things at once after all. Whoosh! At the instant that a smile appeared on Duanling Tian's face, the finger that Duanling Tian pointed out instantly turned to intercept Xiao Ying's claw strike. You're overestimating yourself. Xiao Ying sneered when he saw this scene. As far as he was concerned, even if the claw he executed with a martial skill didn't utilize the strength of his spirit weapon, it was still powered by the strength of 80 ancient mammoths. Whereas the finger Duanling Tian pointed out didn't have a spirit weapon to rely on as well, and only had the strength of 70 ancient mammoths. Duanling Tian could only be trampled on by him. Only when the finger Duanling Tian pointed out and his claw descended down to collide with each other did Xiao Ying's expression change. First it was astonishment, then it was disbelief. Ah! Subsequently, Xiao Ying's shrill cry sounded out from deep within Xiao Ying's throat, as if he'd suffered utmost pain. Under the gazes of everyone present, Duanling Tian's finger penetrated into Xiao Ying's palm, and fresh blood splattered everywhere. Not to mention this, everyone quickly noticed that at the same time that Xiao Ying's emitted shrill cries, his entire body vibrated. Even the hand that held the sword was now powerless, and the grade 7 spirit sword slipped from his hand and dropped to the ground. What's going on? All the Fecta Peak disciples had bewildered expressions as they looked at Xiao Ying, who was emitting shrill cries as he danced on the life and death arena, and completely didn't know what had happened. Crackle, crackle. Before long, a burst of clear sounds of bones fracturing sounded in their ears. The sound is coming from senior brother Xiao Ying's body. Oh my God! What did Duanling Tian do to him? The expressions of all the Fecta Peak disciples went pale. And now, Duanling Tian, who was on the life and death arena, had a cold smile on the corners of his mouth. This Xiao Ying really thought he was overestimating himself? Earlier, when his dragon finishing touch's finger pointed onto Xiao Ying's palm, he's used the quake energy to directly penetrate Xiao Ying's carpal bone. The terrifying quake energy used Xiao Ying's carpal bone as the starting point to spread onto the bones in Xiao Ying's entire body within a blink of an eye, instantly quaking Xiao Ying's bones to the point they shattered. Xiao Ying's body was penetrated by countless shattered bones, and after emitting shrill cried for some time, his voice stopped. Dead. When Xiao Ying died, his eyes were wide like saucers, and even until death he didn't know what had happened. Perhaps, even till death he couldn't wrap his head around it. Even if not using a spirit weapon, why would Duanling Tian, whose strength was far inferior to him, be able to execute a martial skill and kill him with bare hands? Bang! Along with Duanling Tian withdrawing his attacks, Xiao Ying's body was unable to hold on any longer and crashed onto the floor, completely without any signs of life. The surrounding of the life and death arena was deathly silent. Xiao Ying died just like that? Killed by Duan Ling Tian just like that? Too bizarre. I and Xiao Ying both didn't use origin energy. The might of his claw strike was comparable to the strength of 80 ancient mammoths, whereas the might of my finger strike was comparable to the strength of 71 ancient mammoths. It just happens to be within the scope of effect of the quake energy. Duan Ling Tian coldly swept Xiao Ying's corpse with his gaze, and thought in his heart as he thought about the scene from before. If he and Xiao Ying used grade 7 spirit swords, the difference in strength between the two of them was too huge, and had exceeded the scope of effect of the quake energy, and even as he utilized the quake energy, it wouldn't be able to have any effect. So, he could only choose to use his wits. Make Xiao Ying give up the amplification of strength from the grade 7 spirit sword, and fight with him barehanded. Of course, in the eyes of Xiao Ying, even if he didn't use a spirit weapon, he would similarly be able to easily trample on Duan Ling Tian, who didn't use a spirit weapon as well. Unexpectedly, Duan Ling Tian instead had a monstrous thing like the quake energy to rely on. So long as the difference between the opponent's strength and Duan Ling Tian's strength was within the strength of 10 ancient mammoths, he would be able to rely on the quake energy to overcome the strong with a weaker strength. Of course, there was a risk in Duan Ling Tian doing this. If Xiao Ying chose to execute the cutthroat sword and swing his sword to block Duan Ling Tian's finger strike, then he would be unable to use the quake energy as well. Once it was at that time, he could only use an offense inscription if he wanted to kill Xiao Ying. It could be said that Xiao Ying's choice earlier caused him to be bound to die. Of course, even if Xiao Ying chose differently, he was still bound to die, only in a different way. I still have to thank you for saving an offense inscription for me. Duan Ling Tian glanced at Xiao Ying, and a wisp of a sneer appeared on the corners of his mouth. The dense killing intent that condensed deep within his gaze had dispersed slightly. Sherlon, I've taken revenge for you. Duan Ling Tian secretly sighed, and silently said in his heart, "Ha ha, ha 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 ha." Suddenly, a wave of loud laughter broke the silence in the surrounding of the life and death arena. It was Hu Li who'd recovered from his shock and laughed cheerfully, then said in a sonorous voice, "Duan Ling Tian, thank you. If Sherlon is aware in hell, she would be able to rest in peace." Duan Ling Tian nodded, then casually put away Xiao Ying's grade 7 spirit sword and spatial ring, and then came to Hu Li's side before leaving the vast platform the life and death arena is located on with Hu Li and He Chun. The crowd of Fecta Peak disciples gazed from afar at Duan Ling Tian's group of 3 until they left, and only then did the crowd go into an uproar. Oh my god! This Duan Ling Tian actually killed Xiao Ying. Xiao Ying is a 6th level origin core stage martial artist and is able to exert the strength of 102 ancient mammoths when relying on his grade 7 spirit sword. So what? Even though Duan Ling Tian is only at the 5th level of the origin core stage and is only able to exert the strength of 90 ancient mammoths when relying on his grade 7 spirit sword, but he still killed Xiao Ying. Truly beyond belief. How the heck did this Duan Ling Tian kill Xiao Ying? Too terrifying. Today, Fecta Peak was bound to not be at peace. Xiao Ying, the outstanding outer court disciple of Fecta Peak who had a cultivation at the 6th level of the origin core stage, a figure that was known even within the entire 7-star sword sect's outer court. However, he was killed just like that. Moreover, he was killed by a 5th level origin core stage outer court disciple. Duan Ling Tian, you're too strong. You pointed a finger and killed Xiao Ying. On the way back, the gloominess that had accumulated between Hu Li's brows for many days had completely dispersed, and he was extremely excited and cheerful. Duan Ling Tian lightly smiled. He Chun supported Hu Li, and a tremendous change had occurred in his gaze when he looked at Duan Ling Tian. He never imagined that Duan Ling Tian's strength was so terrifying. Duan Ling Tian, being a 5th level origin core stage martial artist, already caused him to feel incomparably shocked. When he saw Duan Ling Tian kill Xiao Ying, his heart shook, and even now it still hadn't completely calmed. "Hu Li, do you know where that Xiao Fei's residence is?" A trace of icy cold killing intent flashed within Duan Ling Tian's eyes as he slowly asked. In a spacious gorge, Xiao Fei's mood was elated as he whistled and lay on the grass, bathing in the sun to his heart's content. Suddenly, a burst of sounds fell into his ears, causing his gaze to suddenly shine. "Brother, you've returned?" Xiao Fei's hands propped onto the ground, and he said joyously as he sat up. But when he saw the young man that appeared before him, his expression went completely pale. Duan Ling Tian, aren't you deciding life and death with my brother on the life and death arena? Why are you here? Why do you think I'm here?" Duan Ling Tian gazed calmly at Xiao Fei as he spoke indifferently, with a tone that didn't contain any feelings. Moreover, the more he was like this, the more scary it was to Xiao Fei, and Xiao Fei's face was ghastly pale as he unceasingly swayed his head. "No. Impossible. It's impossible. How could you possibly defeat my brother? Impossible, impossible." "Impossible?" A trace of ridicule appeared on the corners of Duan Ling Tian's mouth. "What's impossible about it? In the primeval forest 2 months ago, didn't you think it would be impossible for me to survive when you made me battle the elephant rhino?" Xiao Fei's body trembled, although he still wasn't willing to believe all this was true, but he'd realized that milk was already spilt, and even if he wasn't willing, the facts were like this and he was unable to change it. Bang! Xiao Fei instantly fell to the ground and lay before Duan Ling Tian with a ghastly pale face. "Duan Ling Tian, I'm already a cripple. Let me off. Let me off. I beg you, I beg you." How familiar was this scene before Duan Ling Tian to him? 2 months ago, Xiao Fei similarly lay before Shirlan and asked Shirlan to plead for mercy on his behalf. And Shirlan gave in because of this. But the result? Shirlan met with a tragic death. Hu Li, crippled. Xiao Fei's actions and voice when pleading for mercy causing the hatred concealed deep within Duan Ling Tian's heart to once again leap up. His eyes transformed into a crimson-red color as he stared at Xiao Fei. "Xiao Fei, do you remember what I told you 2 months ago?" Xiao Fei's face was deathly pale when he heard this, and his body trembled. Duan Ling Tian started laughing when he saw Xiao Fei's reaction. He laughed extremely coldly. "Looks like you still clearly remember. I told you that if you were to get any ideas, then I'll make you die a graveless death. Duan Ling Tian, spare me. I beg you. I beg you." Xiao Fei fiercely knocked his head onto the ground, knocking to the point his head was bruised and bled, as if wanting to arouse Duan Ling Tian's sympathy. But would Duan Ling Tian have sympathy to Xiao Fei? Duan Ling Tian's gaze was cold and indifferent as he looked at Xiao Fei, who kowtowed and pleaded for mercy before him, and his heart was cold as ice. Suddenly, Duan Ling Tian raised his hand. Whoosh! A sword strike flashed by, killing Xiao Fei. Hiss! Pill flame lit up and burnt Xiao Fei's body into ash, dying a graveless death. Duan Ling Tian didn't feel happy in the slightest after kill Xiao Fei and his brother one after the other. His mood was incomparably heavy. He couldn't get rid of Shirlan's figure in his mind. The girl who was full of yearning to the future, that girl that was filled with confidence, was gone just like that. In his eyes, even if Xiao Fei and his brother died 100 times, they wouldn't be able to atone for Shirlan's life. Duan Ling Tian took a deep breath and eased up his mood, then left the gorge and Fekta Peak. On the way, he didn't encounter anyone. Practically all the Fekta Peak outer court disciples were gathered at the life and death arena halfway down the mountain. After leaving Fekta Peak, Duan Ling Tian stepped onto the chain bridge and once again arrived at the main peak, Dubhe Peak, then directly headed to Alcade Peak. He traveled familiarly to the place of cultivation of the two little girls, but noticed that it was silent within the vast gorge, and the gorge was overgrown with weeds. The wooden house was tainted with a layer of dust. Obviously, it had been a long time since someone stayed here. Looks like Ku Er and Li Fei ought to have moved out. Duan Ling Tian left the gorge and asked for the location of Elder Bai's residence from the Alcade Peak disciples, then went over. Duan Ling Tian met Elder Bai as he wished. Elder Bai. Elder Bai shook her head and smiled when she saw Duan Ling Tian. "If it wasn't for Li Fei telling me, I still wouldn't know that the Migres Peak's little freak that gave rise to much discussion 2 months ago is actually you." Duanling Tian laughed embarrassedly, and as he thought about the reason he came to Alcade Peak, he hurriedly asked, "Elder Bai, I went to the place Little Fei and Ku Er cultivated before, but noticed they weren't there. Fei is here with me, but she's now in closed-door cultivation. As for that girl Ku Er, she's now in Alcade Hall on Dubby Peak." Elder Bai lightly smiled and said, "Alcade Hall?" Duanling Tian was stunned. Alcade Hall is the place of cultivation for the Peak Master of Alcade Peak and is situated on a spirit point on Dubhe Peak. That place is the best place of cultivation of our 7-star sword sect. The cultivation location of the other Peak Masters are also there. Elder Bai slowly explained. Just like your Migres Peak's Peak Master, he also has a Migres Hall there. Duanling Tian came to a sudden understanding and nodded. As for what best place of cultivation, Duanling Tian neither agreed nor disagreed. The cultivation environment of that so-called spirit point was impossible to compare to the stalactite cave he lived in now. "Is Ku Er well?" Duanling Tian looked at Elder Bai and asked concernedly. "Don't worry, the Peak Master is extremely fond of this closed-door disciple. There's one thing that you were right on. 1 month ago, Ku Er broke through to the 4th level of the Origin Core stage." As Elder Bai spoke to this point, she glanced deeply at Duanling Tian. Duanling Tian shook his head and smiled. "Elder Bai, Little Fei ought to have broken through as well, right?" "Yes." Elder Bai's face revealed a gratified smile. She was more and more satisfied toward her disciple. Fei went into closed-door cultivation this time, precisely to prepare for charging towards the 4th level of the Origin Core stage. If there's no urgent matter. Even though Elder Bai didn't finish speaking, but Duanling Tian still understood what Elder Bai meant. "Don't worry, Elder Bai, I don't have any urgent matter. Since Little Fei at the critical juncture for breaking through, I won't disturb her, and I'll come see her next time." Elder Bai nodded in satisfaction when she saw Duanling Tian be so sensible. "Elder Bai." Suddenly, Duanling Tian seemed to have thought of something and asked under Elder Bai's wondering gaze, "Do you know of the matter of a female disciple of your Alcade Peak was forced by someone to fall down the cliff and die?" Elder Bai nodded. "Yes." "Alcade Peak isn't taking any action towards this matter?" Duanling Tian frowned. After that Xiaoing forced Shirlan to death, he seems to live unrestrainedly and wasn't affected in the slightest. "I'm furious on that matter as well. But she jumped off the cliff herself, after all. Moreover, that Fecta Peak disciple didn't succeed. Coupled with the fact that Fecta Peak disciple is a 6th-level Origin Core stage martial artist, the Fecta Peak is extremely protective of him." Elder Bai sighed. "In this world, strength represents the worth of one's life. If the female disciple that jumped off the cliff was a 6th-level Origin Core stage martial artist as well, then our Alcade Peak would surely follow up this matter until the end. Just because she was dispensable to Alcade Peak, so Alcade Peak gave up on her like this?" Traces of coldness arose suddenly within Duanling Tian's heart. His heart was cold like ice. "This is the general trend, although I personally pity her, but I have the heart but not the strength." "What? You know her?" As she finished speaking, Elder Bai asked. "Yes." Duanling Tian nodded. "If she's a friend of yours, and you and Ku Er have that layer of relationship, if you ask Ku Er to ask the Peak Master to step forwards, then you can punish that Fecta Peak disciple." Elder Bai looked at Duanling Tian and slowly said, "It isn't necessary anymore." Duanling Tian shook his head, as he knew that even if the Alcade Peak's Peak Master stepped forwards, they still might not sentence Xiaoing to death, and at most would be sentence him to heavy punishment. Now, he's already killed Xiaoing and took revenge for Shirlan. It wasn't necessary to rely on anyone. "It isn't necessary?" Elder Bai didn't understand what Duanling Tian meant. "You'll know very soon." "Elder Bai, since Little Fei is cultivating, then I'll leave first." Duanling Tian bid his farewells, then turned and left, only leaving behind Elder Bai, who was a bewildered expression as she stood on the spot. This little fellow, what did he mean by what he said earlier? After an hour, a piece of news spread throughout Alcade Peak causing Elder Bai to be dumbstruck. The Migres Peak's outer court disciple, Duanling Tian, used a cultivation at the 5th level of the Origin Core stage to kill the Fecta Peak's 6th level Origin Core stage outer court disciple, Xiao Ying, on the Fecta Peak's life and death arena. Now, Elder Bai finally understood why Duanling Tian would say it wasn't necessary anymore. He'd already taken revenge for that Alcade Peak female disciple by himself. She remembered that the Fecta Peak disciple that caused the death of the female disciple was precisely Xiao Ying. Xiao Ying was dead just like this? As expected of the Migres Peak's little freak. A wisp of a bitter smile appeared on the corners of Elder Bai's mouth. Then she shook her head and muttered, "Fei, you found an extraordinary man. Possessing a cultivation at the 5th level of the Origin Core stage at the mere age of 20. Shocking." At the same time that the news of Duanling Tian killing Xiao Ying spread to Alcade Peak, it also spread to Migres Peak. F***K. Duanling Tian killed the Fecta Peak's Xiao Ying? It can't be. This is too exaggerated. Unbelievable. No wonder he dared invite senior brother Tang Bai to battle on the life and death arena. I wonder if senior brother Tang Bai will still dare ascend to the life and death arena tomorrow. I think it's slightly dangerous. Senior brother Tang Bai's strength might not be stronger than that Xiao Ying. We'll naturally know tomorrow whether senior brother Tang Bai dares to ascend the life and death arena or not. The entire Migres Peak was in an uproar because of this piece of news. All the Migres Peak disciples were brimming with energy. Duanling Tian's actions could be considered as bringing honor to Migres Peak, and they as Migres Peak disciples all felt honored. At least, when standing before Fecta Peak disciples in the future, the Fecta Peak disciples were bound to be once lower than them, once they mentioned this matter. Within the stalactite cave on the mountain peak of Migres Peak, Duanling Tian sat cross-legged on the stone platform and calmed his heart to cultivate. The 9 dragons wore sovereign techniques WYRM Python form. The origin energy within Duanling Tian's body roiled and ceaselessly charged at the 4th level origin core stage bottleneck, time after time, as if not knowing exhaustion. After an unknown amount of time, bang! Finally, the roiling origin energy charged through the bottleneck and completed a new transformation. Meanwhile, at this time, Duanling Tian opened his eyes as well. His eyes were dazzling like an array of stars, and he was entirely brimming with vigor and vitality. I've broken through. A joyful smile appeared on Duanling Tian's face, lightly clenching his hand into a fist. Above Duanling Tian, the energy of heaven and earth roiled, and 81 ancient mammoth silhouettes condensed into form. Similar to before, after he broke through to the 5th level of the Origin Core stage, his strength was an entire 10 ancient mammoths, more than ordinary 5th level Origin Core stage martial artists. My current strength is stronger even if compared with a 6th level Origin Core stage martial artist. I possesses an extra strength of 1 ancient mammoth, more than a 6th level Origin Core stage martial artist. A wisp of a smile appeared on the corners of Duanling Tian's mouth. Right. I've invited that Tang Bai to the life and death arena today. In next to no time, Duanling Tian finally recalled his proper business and hurriedly left the stalactite cave, then jumped onto the mountain peak. He glanced at the sky and noticed that there was still a period of time before noon. Who? Duanling Tian let out a breath of air. I can still make it. Duanling Tian left the peak of Migres Peak, then flashed towards the life and death arena halfway down the mountain, as if he'd transformed into a gust of wind. Now that I've broken through to the 5th level of the Origin Core stage, the quake energy ought to have advanced, but I wonder how much stronger it's become. On the way, Duanling Tian's mood surged. Just nice, so long as that Tang Bai ascends the life and death arena. I'll only use the strength of an ordinary 5th level Origin Core stage martial artist, then use the quake energy to properly play with him. As he thought up to here, Duanling Tian's eyes suddenly lit up. Before long, Duanling Tian arrived at the vast platform that the life and death arena was situated on. Now, it was nearly noon. Duanling Tian noticed that incomparably vast streams of people flowed around the life and death arena. even to the extent there were many unfamiliar faces. There's so many people in Migres Peak? Duan Ling Tian was startled when he saw so many people, as these people practically filled the entire platform, a dense dark mass of people. Why haven't Duan Ling Tian and senior brother Tang Bai come yet? Yeah, it's about to be noon, and they actually haven't come. He just come close to the crowd when Duan Ling Tian heard a burst of discussion. It's Duan Ling Tian. In next to no time, someone noticed Duan Ling Tian. Meanwhile, the packed crowd automatically opened up a path for Duan Ling Tian, a path that headed to the life and death arena. After Duan Ling Tian ascended to the life and death arena, he closed his eyes and started resting, silently waiting for the arrival of Tang Bai. The blazing sun hung high in the sky, and noon came as scheduled. The vast platform that the life and death arena was located on was silent. Tang Bai still hasn't come? Duan Ling Tian opened his eyes that were bright like an array of stars, and his gaze descended onto the area outside of the vast platform, but he didn't notice any traces of Tang Bai. It's already noon now, and Tang Bai still hasn't come. He probably doesn't dare come. I guessed it. Tang Bai is frightened as expected. Duan Ling Tian had only just killed the Fecta Peak's Xiaoying yesterday, and Xiaoying's strength wasn't inferior to Tang Bai, so it's normal for him to not dare to come. Yesterday, he was still putting on airs before Duan Ling Tian, and said that at that time, he hoped Duan Ling Tian would dare to come. Now, he himself didn't dare come. It's virtually slapping his own face. What a shame. The surroundings of the life and death arena were in a complete uproar. There's even female disciples. Duan Ling Tian's gaze flashed past the surroundings of the life and death arena, and only now did he notice that there were quite a few female outer court disciples within the crowd of spectators. They were all Alcade Peak disciples. Looks like disciples from the other peaks have come to Migres Peak to join in the excitement as well. Duan Ling Tian's thought inwardly. But unfortunately, they were bound to be disappointed. After waiting for a while more, Tang Bai still didn't appear. Duan Ling Tian's brows knit and didn't wait any longer as he directly leapt off the life and death arena, then left. He wasn't surprised that Tang Bai didn't show up. After all, once one ascended the life and death arena, it would mean the battle wouldn't end until a party died. That Tang Bai didn't have any deep enmity with him. Tang Bai agreeing to ascend the life and death arena yesterday was because Tang Bai was confident of himself, and he felt he was able to seize the fictitious muscle meridian rebirth scroll cultivation method from Duan Ling Tian. Now that the news of him killing the Fecta Peak's 6th level origin core stage outer court disciple, Xiao Ying, had spread out, Tang Bai showing caution and not daring to show up was within Duan Ling Tian's expectations. Duan Ling Tian's mood didn't have any large fluctuations, as from the beginning, he didn't take Tang Bai to heart. Moreover, Duan Ling Tian was clear that after today's matter, that Tang Bai was bound to be infamous and be held in contempt by all 7-star sword sect disciples. A person that agreed to a life and death invitation but didn't dare show up was undoubtedly a coward, and on the martial Dao, it would be difficult for such a person to have any great accomplishments. When Duan Ling Tian left, he could hear the burst of discussions that sounded out from behind him. They were without a doubt condemning Tang Bai. In a spacious gorge, the burning sunlight scattered downwards, causing everything inside the gorge to seem as if being paved by a layer of gold. Elder Zhao Lin, you didn't tell me that he's even able to kill 6th level origin core stage martial artists. The young man around 25 years of age with handsome and refined features had an extremely unsightly expression, and his figure lightly trembled as he looked at the middle-aged man before him and asked in a low voice. He knew that after today, he would have no reputation to speak off in 7-star sword sect. He was bound to become the target of everyone's disdain. This caused him to feel resentment and feel aggrieved in his heart. And all this was because of the middle-aged man before him. If it wasn't for this middle-aged man, his current situation wouldn't be so embarrassing. Tang Bai, do you think that I, Zhao Lin, would intentionally cause harm to you? Zhao Lin's face sank, cold lights flickered in his eyes, and they were suffused with traces of killing intent. Even he didn't expect the incident from yesterday. That Duanling Tian actually was able to kill even a 6th level origin core stage outer court disciple. Such strength caused one's heart to tremble. He suddenly realized that it wouldn't be so easy for him to obtain that miraculous cultivation technique in Duanling Tian's possession. I'm sorry, Elder Zhao Lin. I was too agitated earlier. Tang Bai took a deep breath when he saw Zhao Ling get enraged and even have killing intent to him, and he hurriedly changed his way of speaking. Only now did he realize that the person that stood before him was the Migres Peak's outer court disciple, an existence at the void prying stage. Wanting to kill him was even easier than cutting grass. He didn't dare bear a grudge against Zhao Lin. So, he turned his belly full of hate to somewhere else. Duanling Tian. After Tang Bai left, Zhao Lin's eyes flickered with an awe-inspiring luster, and his voice was low and suppressed. Duanling Tian, I really never imagined that a mere young man that's a little over 20 like you actually possesses such formidable strength. It looks like my guess is correct. The Muscle Meridian Rebirth Scroll that Duanling Tian cultivated had a worth not lower than 10,000 year stalactite milk. The desire in Zhao Lin's heart was even more difficult to suppress. As far as he was concerned, it was all because of the Muscle Meridian Rebirth Scroll that Duanling Tian possessed such a cultivation at such an age. Since all of the outer court disciples are helpless against you, then I can only personally make a move. I don't believe that I'll be unable to find an opportunity to kill you. So long as I burn the corpse to destroy the evidence, who would know that it was I who killed you? Zhao Lin muttered, and his eyes emitted utmost greed and dense killing intent. After Duanling Tian left the Migres Peak's life and death arena, he didn't return to the stalactite cave, and instead once again went to Fecta Peak to look for Hu Li. Hu Li, what plans do you have for the future? Duanling Tian looked at Hu Li and asked in a low voice. Hu Li wasn't dejected like before now, and was brimming with vigor and vitality, not dejected in the slightest because one of his legs was crippled. I'm a cripple now, even if the 7-star sword sect would temporarily not expel me, but once I'm 30, I'm bound to be unable to become an inner court disciple and will be expelled all the same. So, I've decided to return home. You'll return like this? Although he knew that Hu Li's choice was wise, but now when he looked at Hu Li's severed leg, Duanling Tian couldn't help but sigh. He could imagine how Hu Li's family members would surely have been very happy when Hu Li became a 7-star sword sect disciple, and they thought that Hu Li would soar up into the sky. But now, Hu Li would return with a crippled body and would surely have to endure extremely huge pressure. Don't worry. Hu Li smiled brightly when he perceived Duanling Tian's worries. Isn't it only a leg? Unless it's a martial artist with the same cultivation as me, or perhaps someone abnormal like you, otherwise, it isn't so easy to defeat me. Duanling Tian nodded, as he was at ease when he saw Hu Li being so optimistic. I'll send you home? Duanling Tian pondered for a moment, then said, There's no need. I've already written a letter home a while back, and my family members ought to arrive in another few days. Duanling Tian, cultivate properly, as the 7-star sword sect outer court martial competition is in another 3 months. At that time, take the first place so I can boast at home. As Hu Li finished speaking, he laughed heartily, and wasn't like a person who'd lost a leg at all. Even though he knew that what Hu Li said was partially a joke, but Duanling Tian still had a serious expression as he nodded. Don't worry, I'll surely obtain first place in the outer court martial competition. No one can stop my footsteps. As he finished speaking, Duanling Tian's eyes flickered with a steadfast sheen. This was his promise to Hu Li. Why are you so serious for? Don't worry, so long as the 7-star sword sect doesn't change the rules of the outer court martial competition, the outer court disciples that participated in the outer court martial competition would at most be at the 6th level of the origin core stage. You're even able to kill Xiaoying. Could it be that you're still afraid of other 6th level origin core stage disciples? Hu Li was extremely confident of Duanling Tian. Therefore, the first place in the outer court martial competition is something you'll surely take. Duanling Tian nodded, then accompanied Hu Li for a while longer. Before he left, he withdrew a pill bottle and passed it to Hu Li. Hu Li, take this. What medicinal pill is this? Hu Li received the pill bottle with a curious expression. This isn't a medicinal pill, but a drop of wine. Duanling Tian shook his head and slowly said, "A drop of wine?" Hu Li was first stunned when he heard Duanling Tian, then laughed as he scolded. "You're really stingy. How do I drink a drop of wine?" Hu Li opened the pill bottle as he spoke. Along with the strong wine fragrance floating out, Hu Li's body trembled, and he didn't finish speaking when he looked at Duanling Tian with an astonished expression. "Duanling Tian, what? What wine is this?" Earlier, when he smelt the wine fragrance, Hu Li felt the origin energy within his body roil, and nearly allowed him to charge through the bottleneck of the third level of the origin core stage to break through to the fourth level of the origin core stage. Even though he didn't break through, but Hu Li had the feeling that if he consumed this drop of wine within the pill bottle, he would absolutely be able to break through instantly. Monkey King wine. Duanling Tian Light smiled as he said, "Monkey King wine?" Hu Li was dazed. Duanling Tian was able to discern that Hu Li hadn't heard of the Monkey King wine and instantly explained, "Then have you heard of monkey wine?" "Of course I have. That's a great thing. Could it be that the monkey wine and Monkey King wine are related?" Hu Li's eyes shone as was slightly excited. The monkey wine was an existence of legend, and he'd only seen record of it in some ancient books. "Didn't you say I'm stingy earlier? This jug of wine is for you to drink until you're satisfied." Duanling Tian withdrew a jug of wine and passed it to Hu Li. "This wine fragrance." Hu Li's gaze shone, although the wine fragrance from this jug of wine was far inferior to the Monkey King wine, but it was able to cause the origin energy within his body to be restless. "This is monkey wine." Duanling Tian smiled. "Drink and try it." "This is monkey wine?" Hu Li's eyes sprang wide open, but he didn't directly drink the monkey wine, and instead looked at the pill bottle in his hand. Even though he'd never heard of Monkey King wine, but he was extremely sure that this drop of Monkey King wine was absolutely more precious than this jug of monkey wine. Duanling Tian guessed his thoughts the moment he saw Hu Li's reaction and lightly smiled. "Hu Li, you can directly drink the monkey wine and cultivate, and if everything goes as planned, it ought to be able to help you break through to the fourth level of the origin core stage. As for the Monkey King wine, properly store it." Duanling Tian, "Don't beat around the bush. What the heck is the use of this Monkey King wine?" Hu Li rolled his eyes as Duanling Tian and asked impatiently. "The Monkey King wine has a similar medicinal effect as the Void Advancement pill, but better than the Void Advancement pill. The Monkey King wine doesn't have the side effect of the Void Advancement pill." Duanling Tian didn't waste time when he saw Hu Li becoming impatient and directly spoke. "Once one consumed the Void Advancement pill, one would have no fate with the Void Initiation stage in this lifetime, and at most could cultivate to the 9th level of the Void Prying stage. Whereas consuming the Monkey King wine wouldn't have this side effect." "What?" When he heard what Duanling Tian said, Hu Li's pupils constricted as his figure trembled, and he had a face of inexplicable astonishment. Although Hu Li hadn't seen a Void Advancement pill before, but he'd heard of it. The Void Advancement pill, a precious grade medicinal pill that's able to allow a half-step Void stage martial artist to directly step into the Void Prying stage, and possessed extraordinary value. Now, the drop of Monkey King wine in his hand actually had the medicinal effect of a Void Advancement pill, and it's the effect of a Void Advancement pill without side effects? Wouldn't that mean that this drop of Monkey King wine is even more valuable than a Void Advancement pill? Hu Li's breathing became hurried, and in the end he gritted his teeth before passing the pill bottle that contained the drop of Monkey King wine back to Duanling Tian. "Duanling Tian, this Monkey King wine is too valuable. I can't keep it. I'm perfectly satisfied and content that I'm being able to drink this monkey wine in this lifetime." As he finished speaking, Hu Li laughed slyly and had a simple and honest expression as he looked at his other hand that held the jug of wine. "You really don't want it?" Duanling Tian received the pill bottle, and a wisp of a smile appeared on the corners of his mouth. "No." Hu Li shook his head, and with a raise of his hand, he put the spout of the jug of wine against his mouth, then drank the monkey wine. Hu Li only drank a mouthful when his eyes couldn't help but spring open wide. Then he put down the wine jug and closed his eyes. Duanling Tian was able to discern that Hu Li was cultivating, and dissolving the medicinal strength of the monkey wine. When Huli opened his eyes once again, a strand of bright light flashed within. You broke through just like that? Duan Ling Tian was stunned as he looked at Hu Li, as relying on his sharp spiritual force, he perceived that minute changes that had occurred on Hu Li's body. I was originally only one last step away from breaking through to the 4th level of the origin core stage. Now that I've drank the monkey wine, I directly broke through in one go. Hu Li laughed and looked fixedly at the jug of monkey wine in his hand, as if he'd obtained a treasure, as if deeply afraid the monkey wine would vanish from his hands. You really don't want this drop of Monkey King wine? With it, and relying on your natural talent, so long as you step into the half-step void stage in the future, you'll be able to break through to the void prying stage in one go. Duan Ling Tian shook the pill bottle in his hand that contained the Monkey King wine, and the smile on the corners of his mouth grew even wider. Hu Li glances at the pill bottle with reluctance when he heard Duan Ling Tian, but in the end he shook his head. Keep it for yourself? I presume you don't have much of this Monkey King wine. In the future, you'll be able to use it eventually. Duan Ling Tian never expected that when faced with such great temptation, Hu Li would actually think for his sake, and his heart was slightly warm. Hu Li was worthy of being taken as a life and death friend by him. All right, I won't tease you anymore. Keep it. Even though the Monkey King wine in my possession isn't many, but it's still enough. Duan Ling Tian didn't care about Hu Li's refusal as he shoved the pill bottle in Hu Li's hand, then turned around and left in an unrestrained manner. I'm leaving. I have some things to do. I won't send you off when you're leaving, right? Tell He Chun your house address later and ask him to tell it to me. I'll go see you when I'm free in the future. At the same time that Duan Ling Tian left, he raised his hand and waved it, bidding his farewell to Hu Li. Even though he had a slight sense of loss in his heart, but he understood that all good things in this world must come to an end. Duan Ling Tian, thank you. Hu Li took a deep breath as he gazed at Duan Ling Tian's restrained figure vanishing into the distance and was slightly excited. He glanced at the Monkey King wine and monkey wine in his hand, and his mood was slightly heavy. Duan Ling Tian's gift was too valuable. When he saw Duan Ling Tian's figure completely disappeared before him, Hu Li's eyes squinted and lit up with traces of bright light, then muttered, Duan Ling Tian, don't worry. Even if one of my legs is crippled, I won't die down just like this. I'll surely make you look at me in a different light the next time we meet. At this moment, Hu Li's will in the martial Dao was firm like a sharp sword, as if it could destroy everything. And it was precisely because of this determination that caused Duan Ling Tian to have a face full of shock and disbelief when he met Hu Li again many years from then. Who? Duan Ling Tian let out a long breath of air after he left the gorge Hu Li was in. Even after experiencing 2 lifetimes, when faced with farewells, Duan Ling Tian's heart still had an inexplicable feeling of sadness. Time to once again go look for those 2 little fellows that make me worry. After Duan Ling Tian left Fekta Peak, he didn't return to Migres Peak, and directly walked down Dubhe Peak, then walked out of the sect to head towards the primeval forest that fierce beasts and demon beasts roamed unrestrainedly in. After Duan Ling Tian entered the primeval forest, he sped up. All the fierce beasts that he encountered on the way were practically killed with a single fist from him, even to the extent he didn't use martial skills or quake energy. Finally, along with him continuously entering deeper into the primeval forest, the fierce beasts he encountered became stronger, and there were even many 6th-level origin core stage fierce beasts. Practically all these fierce beasts had their throats slit with a single sword strike. With the strength that Duan Ling Tian controlled now, when he executed the sword-drawing arts, the speed of his sword was something that even 6th-level origin core stage fierce beasts wouldn't be able to react to. I should test some quake energy. Duan Ling Tian's gaze looked around, then his figure flashed out. Spirit Serpent movement technique. Continue going deeper in. Roar. A loud roar that deafened the ears entered into Duan Ling Tian's ears, causing Duan Ling Tian's eardrums to hurt, as if a thunderclap piercing his ears. Bang! An enormous fierce beast came over from afar, as if transforming into a gust of wind that descended before Duan Ling Tian in the blink of an eye. When the fierce beast dashed, the ground shook as if the earth quaked and the hills swayed. In the air, 100 ancient mammoth silhouettes appeared. 7-level origin core stage fierce beast. Duan Ling Tian was shocked in his heart, and he seriously sized up the fierce beast before him. This was an enormous tiger that was covered in jet black and shiny fur, and spots of sunlight passed through the shroud of the forest to descend onto its body, causing its fur to flicker with a dazzling sheen. Relying on the erudite memories of Rebirth Martial Emperor, Duan Ling Tian recognized this tiger-type fierce beast with a single glance. Black Tiger, 7th-level origin core stage fierce beast. This black tiger was most adept at speed and strength, and its defense was slightly weak. Of course, saying its defense was weak was only comparatively weaker to other 7th-level origin core stage fierce beasts. Roar! The dark gray-colored eyes of the black tiger stared at Duan Ling Tian, and it opened its bloody mouth to emit a threatening low roar, as if warning Duan Ling Tian to leave its domain. Interesting. A smile appeared on the corners of Duan Ling Tian's mouth, and his eyes sized up the black tiger before him with interest. The black tiger saw Duan Ling Tian smiling and thought Duan Ling Tian was provoking it, then roared in rage before pouncing towards Duan Ling Tian. It opened its bloody mouth and fiercely bit at him. The fangs of the black tiger flickered with a sharp and icy cold sheen. If Duan Ling Tian were to be bitten, it would be impossible for him to survive. So fast. The black tiger's speed relied on the strength of 100 ancient mammoths to power, and was far from something Duan Ling Tian's current speed could compare to. At the instant that the black tiger pounced over, Duan Ling Tian didn't dodge and instead leaped on the spot, perfectly dodging the black tiger's bloody mouth and those sharp fangs. Bang! The black tiger's pounce hit nothing, and a sense of rage arose within its dark gray eyes. Roar! The black tiger roared lowly, then it turned its head to once again bite at Duan Ling Tian. And just at this moment, Duan Ling Tian made his move. The strength of 81 ancient mammoths fully exploded out, without holding back. Dragon's finishing touch. Duan Ling Tian pointed out his finger with the profundity of a dragon's finishing touch, and brought about a burst of piercing sounds as it pointed onto the forehead of the black tiger. Suddenly, Duan Ling Tian's gaze went cold. Quake energy. Instantly, the origin energy on the tip of Duan Ling Tian's finger violently jumped about, and the frequency grew higher and higher. Pooh! Under the assistance of the quake energy, Duan Ling Tian's finger seemed to transform into a sharp sword that easily penetrated the black tiger between the brows, and fresh blood scattered into the air as his finger continued to point onto the black tiger's skull. Roar! The black tiger emitted a miserable low roar. Then its enormous figure abruptly trembled, wanting to resist. But unfortunately, his resistance was too late. Along with Duan Ling Tian's finger descending down and pointing onto the black tiger's skull, the terrifying quake energy instantly shattered the black tiger's skull and continued to spread onto the bones in the black tiger's entire body. Crackle, crackle. Ear-piercing sounds of bones fracturing slowly suppressed the low roars of the black tiger that slowly became dispirited. Bang! It wasn't long before the enormous body of the black tiger crashed onto the ground and was completely devoid of any signs of life. Duan Ling Tian's gaze abruptly shone as he looked at the black tiger's corpse that collapsed and was slightly excited. I never imagined that the quake energy advanced so much. The finger strike Duan Ling Tian pointed out earlier relied upon all the strength in him, the strength of 81 ancient mammoths, whereas the black tiger instead possessed a strength of 100 ancient mammoths. Compared to it, Duan Ling Tian's strength was an entire 19 ancient mammoths lesser. If it was the quake energy from before, it would be impossible to affect the black tiger. Now, it instead killed the black tiger like cutting through dry leaves. In other words, the scope of effect of the quake energy had increased significantly. In the past, the effect of the quake energy was only able to materialize on opponents who weren't more than 10 ancient mammoths stronger than Duan Ling Tian. In other words, the past quake energy scope of effect was within the strength of 10 ancient mammoths. Now, Based on the present circumstances, even if Duan Ling Tian and the Black Tiger had a difference of strength of 19 ancient mammoths between them, but the effects of the quake energy still manifested. In other words, the scope of effect of the quake energy had already extended to the strength of 19 ancient mammoths. Specific details would still require Duan Ling Tian to test it by himself. Duan Ling Tian put away the Black Tiger's beast core, then continued to head deeper into the primeval forest. Subsequently, he successively encountered 3 7th-level origin core stage fierce beasts, and completely tested and found out the scope of effect of the quake energy he now controlled. The scope of effect of the quake energy was within the strength of 20 ancient mammoths currently. In other words, when Duan Ling Tian killed the Black Tiger with quake energy before, it just happened to be within the limit of the scope of effect of the quake energy. With my current strength and relying on quake energy, I'm practically invincible at the 7th level of the origin core stage and below. If a 7th level origin core stage martial artist didn't use a spirit weapon, or perhaps their spirit weapon is inferior to mine, then they're all not a match for me. Duan Ling Tian slightly pondered and speculated in his heart. Of course, he knew that the latter circumstances might be possible in any other place, but if within the 7-star sword sect, it was practically impossible. Practically all 7-star sword sect disciples at the 7th level of the origin core stage or above possessed a grade 7 spirit sword. In terms of spirit weapons, he didn't have any advantages. Now, when he faced 7th level origin core stage disciples of the 7-star sword sect, it was similar to when he faced the Fecta Peak's Xiao Ying when his cultivation was at the 4th level of the origin core stage. Unless he can make his opponent abandon the sword. Otherwise, if he didn't use an inscription, it would be extremely difficult to defeat his opponent. No matter what, Duan Ling Tian was extremely satisfied towards his current strength. Even in the foreign lands, having such accomplishments at his age could be considered to be not bad. Of course, it could only be considered to be not bad. According to the memories of Rebirth Martial Emperor, the number of experts in the foreign lands were like the clouds in the sky, and some powers had even been around for 10,000 years. The future generations that those powers had fostered were all extremely formidable. Some geniuses amongst geniuses had even already broken through to the nascent soul stage at Duan Ling Tian's current age. Of course, the reason that these people's cultivations advanced so quickly was because they possessed the best cultivation resource. Even though they didn't have the assistance of the medicinal pills with over 90% purity that Duan Ling Tian refined, they instead had the various spirit fruits that the powers they belonged to had gathered. Those spirit fruits were all treasures of heaven and earth that could only be chanced upon by luck and not sought for, and were extremely difficult to come by. It could be said that the strength of those geniuses all relied on being piled up by treasures of heaven and earth that was difficult to imagine for ordinary people. Even in the entire Cloud continent, my current natural talent can be considered top-notch, so long as my strength is sufficient in the future and can leave the Darkhan dynasty to head to the foreign lands. Then I can obtain the great treasures the Rebirth Martial Emperor left behind for his 3rd lifetime. Duan Ling Tian couldn't help but be slightly excited in his heart when he thought up to this point. The 3 lives rebirth technique that the Rebirth Martial Emperor cultivated required experiencing 3 lifetimes in order to attain perfection. So, during the 1st lifetime of the Rebirth Martial Emperor, he'd left behind numerous treasures for his 2nd lifetime. And during his 2nd lifetime, the Rebirth Martial Emperor relied on the treasures he left behind in his 1st lifetime to once again cultivate to the peak of the Martial Emperor stage in the shortest amount of time. During his 2nd lifetime, when the Rebirth Martial Emperor planned to carry out the cultivation of the 3rd lifetime for his 3 lives rebirth technique, he'd left behind a large amount of treasures. Those treasures encompassed a myriad of things. There were countless valuable materials and spirit fruit. He even left behind many royal-grade medicinal pills, royal-grade spirit weapons, and even formidable inscriptions that could be called heaven-defying, that ordinary people found difficult to imagine. Besides these, there were many other things. Countless things. These treasures were all kept within a royal-grade spirit weapon spatial ring by the Rebirth Martial Emperor. According to the memories of the Rebirth Martial Emperor, The space within that spatial ring was even larger than the courtyard house he had in the Crimson Sky Kingdom's Imperial City inner city. Unknowingly, Duanling Tian's breathing became hurried. Every time he went through this portion of the Rebirth Martial Emperor's memories, he couldn't help but feel a burst of excitement. Because these things would all be his in the future. Perhaps the Rebirth Martial Emperor never imagined that all he prepared for his third lifetime would benefit me. Slowly, Duanling Tian suppressed the restless mood in his heart. To him, the things that the Rebirth Martial Emperor left behind were truly too shocking. Those things were practically all top-notch things in the Cloud Continent. Royal-grade medicinal pills and royal-grade spirit weapons. These things were something that only the Rebirth Martial Emperor could refine in the 2 lifetimes he experienced. Even now, there might not be a royal-grade alchemist and royal-grade weapons craftsman in Cloud Continent. Duanling Tian thought inwardly. During the 2 age that Rebirth Martial Emperor experiences, not to mention a royal-grade alchemist and royal-grade weapons craftsman, there wasn't even a quasi-royal-grade alchemist or quasi-royal-grade weapons craftsman. Below the Rebirth Martial Emperor, the strongest alchemist and weapons craftsman was only a Grade 1 alchemist and Grade 1 weapons craftsman. I, Duanling Tian, will surely once again stand at the Rebirth Martial Emperor's peak all those years ago. No, I'll surpass the former Rebirth Martial Emperor. Duanling Tian's gaze slowly became firm, and deep within his heart, he'd pledged a resolution that no one and nothing could sway. What am I thinking off to? Returning to his sense, Duanling Tian withdrew his thoughts that had drifted off. I wonder where those 2 little fellow are now. Even if I rely upon a Grade 7 Spirit Sword and Quake Energy, I would at most be able to kill a 9th level Origin Core Stage Fierce Beast. There'll surely be Nascent Soul Stage Fierce Beasts if I go slightly deeper in. With my current strength, Nascent Soul Stage Fierce Beasts are difficult to deal with. Duanling Tian had a plan in his heart. He would go only slightly deeper, then start to search in the surroundings to see if he can notice the tracks left behind by the 2 little pythons. As for deeper in the primeval forest, Duanling Tian abandoned any thoughts of going deeper for now. Although he could rely on the bone corrosion inscription to kill nascent soul stage fierce beasts, but 1 bone corrosion inscription cost a few million silver, thus he couldn't use the bone corrosion inscription to kill all the way in. Even though the wealth in his possession wasn't little, but it couldn't withstand such expenditures. Moreover, there was plenty of money in his spatial ring, but materials to inscribe the bone corrosion inscription weren't plenty. At most it would be enough to inscribe 50 or 60 bone corrosion inscriptions. 2 little fellows that make me worry. Once I find the 2 of you, I'll surely properly teach you 2 a lesson. With feelings of helplessness, Duanling Tian continued to go deeper into the primeval forest, then started to search around the primeval forest. On the way, he'd encountered many 9th level Origin Core Stage Fierce Beasts. These 9th level Origin Core Stage Fierce Beasts had strength equivalent to the strength of 120 ancient mammoths. However, Duanling Tian used his strength of 81 ancient mammoths and relied on the amplification of the Grade 7 Spirit Sword to execute attacks which attained the strength of over 100 ancient mammoths. By relying on the Quake energy, it was difficult for even a 9th level Origin Core Stage Fierce Beast to withstand a sword strike from him. Of course, once he encountered some 9th level Origin Core Stage Fierce Beasts that were adept in speed and concealment, Duanling Tian would be in an extremely sorry state. Needless to say, the primeval forest was extremely large. Duanling Tian took a circle around the outer area of the primeval forest and spent 10 days and 10 nights. For 10 days and 10 nights, he slept in the open in the primeval forest. After 10 days, Duanling Tian practically turned the entire outer area of the primeval forest upside down, and in the end he still didn't notice even a shred of tracks that the 2 little pythons left behind. Forget it, I'll wait for those 2 little fellows to return by themselves. They ought to have entered the inner area of the primeval forest. Duanling Tian shook his head slightly helplessly, then turned around and walked towards the outside of the primeval forest and intended to return to 7-Star Sword Sect. On the way to leaving the primeval forest, he occasionally saw some people hunting fierce beasts, And when he saw the attire of these people, they were all 7-star sword sect outer court disciples. In next to no time, Duanling Tian returned to the 7-star sword sect and arrived at the entrance to the mountain. After entering, Duanling Tian ascended Dubhe Peak. Whoosh! A burst of piercing wind sounded out from ahead, causing Duanling Tian, who was walking on the mountain path, to frown, and at the moment he raised his head, he saw a figure that was swift like a bolt of lightning flashing down the mountain. Even though this person's speed was extremely swift, but Duanling Tian still saw his appearance. This was a young man, with slightly hideous and distorted features, and his pair of triangular eyes caused Duanling Tian to have a familiar feeling. Duanling Tian saw the symbol of the young man's attire. Similar to Duanling Tian, he was an outer court disciple as well. But when this outer court disciple dashed out, 100 ancient mammoths condensed into form above him. 7th level origin core stage martial artist. Duanling Tian moved aside when he discerned that this outer court disciple seemed to be in a hurry. But even then, when the outer court disciple flashed past Duanling Tian, he brought about a strong wind that still caused Duanling Tian's outer court disciple's attire to flutter and whistle in the wind. Duanling Tian frowned and continued up the mountain, then passed through the chain bridge and returned to Migres Peak. When Duanling Tian had just stepped onto the platform on Migres Peak, he noticed a burning gaze descending onto him. Duanling Tian looked over and saw a Migres Peak disciple with an ordinary expression. And when this Migres Peak disciple saw Duanling Tian's gaze sweep over, he hurriedly lowered his head. Relying on his sharp spiritual force and the experiences of Rebirth Martial Emperor, Duanling Tian was able to deduce that the cultivation of this Migres Peak disciple was at most at the 3rd level of the origin core stage. When he intended to return to the peak of Migres Peak, Duanling Tian noticed that Migres Peak disciple actually quietly following him from behind. Humph! Duanling Tian's sharp, spiritual force noticed this Migres Peak disciple following him at the first possible moment, and the corner of his mouth curled into a sneer. So long as it wasn't an existence at the void prying stage or above that was following him, he could rely on his sharp spiritual force and his counter-tracking methods to easily notice the Migres Peak disciple. Duanling Tian intentionally walked into a remote path, then turned into the back of some bushes. As expected, that Migres Peak disciple followed over. Where's he? Before long, the Migres Peak disciple noticed that after his target turned here, his target actually vanished into thin air, and instantly, his face revealed a trace of confusion. Are you looking for me? Meanwhile, Duanling Tian, who was concealed nearby, walked out from the bushes and looked at the Migres Peak disciple that had a panicked expression and said with a terrifyingly calm tone, No, I'm not. At the same time that this Migres Peak disciple was panicked, he hurriedly denied it. Are you kidding? Even though the young man before him was younger than him, the young man's strength wasn't something he could compare to. Even an existence at the 6th level of the origin core stage was killed at the hands of this young man, not to mention him who was a mere 3rd level origin core stage. So, before this young man, he even didn't dare have the thought of fleeing, because he knew that even if he wanted to flee, he wouldn't be able to. No? Duanling Tian's face sank when he heard this Migres Peak disciple, and a dense killing intent spread out from his body, as if transforming into a heaven-encompassing net that enveloped the Migres Peak disciple before him. Instantly, the face of the Migres Peak disciple went ghastly pale, and he felt himself seeming to be in an Azura battlefield. The icy coldness that directly entered his heart caused his body to be unable to refrain from trembling, and he hurriedly circulated his origin energy to withstand it. Only then did he slightly ease up. Who asked you to follow me? Duanling Tian looked at the Migres Peak disciple and asked once more, with a tone that was slightly cold. I didn't follow you. The Migres Peak disciple gritted his teeth to forcefully endure the killing intent and said with a trembling voice, Thickhead. Duanling Tian's gaze went cold when he saw this Migres Peak disciple didn't want to speak, and his leg flashed out like a bolt of lightning, transforming into a string of afterimages. Bang! His leg hit directly on the Migres Peak disciple's chest, kicking him flying then fiercely falling into the nearby bushes. After he kicked the Migres Peak disciple flying, Duanling Tian's body flashed out to follow up. When this Migres Peak disciple wanted to crawl up, Duanling Tian raised his leg then fiercely stomped upon his chest, stomping him back to the ground. Bang! The body of the Migres Peak disciple collapsed on the ground once again, and was shocked by the force to the point his face went deathly pale, then looked at Duanling Tian with a pair of eyes that were filled with fear and dread. "Who sent you?" Duanling Tian's tone was still calm, but his gaze that became even icy colder undoubtedly told this Migres Peak disciple that he already didn't have too much patience left. "There's really no one who sent me." "Really?" The Migres Peak disciple's gaze focused, and he hesitated for a moment before seeming to have some apprehensions as he said with a panicked expression, "Very good." Duanling Tian's gaze went slightly cold when he saw the Migres Peak disciple still being thick-headed even at such a time, and with a raise of his hand, a 3-foot-long blade that flickered with an icy cold light appeared out of thin air in his hand. "No, don't." The Migres Peak disciple's pupils constricted when he saw Duanling Tian withdraw a sword, and his face went deathly pale. "I'll give you the time of 10 breaths to consider. After 10 breaths, if you don't speak, then I'll kill you. You ought to know that even though the 7-star sword sect prohibits fellow disciples from killing each other, but so long as no one sees me kill you, nothing will happen to me." Duanling Tian weighed the 3-foot-long blade in his hand, then lightly extended his hand to stroke the blade of the sword, as if he was gently caressing his lover. When Duanling Tian's words that didn't contain the slightest emotion entered into the ears of the Migres Peak disciple, it caused his face to go even paler, and traces of fear was mixed within his eyes. He naturally knew what Duanling Tian said was true. If he really died here, with the remoteness of this place, even if someone found his corpse, it would probably a matter of another few days from now. At that time, even if the resources of the 7-star sword sect were any greater, and the strength of the 7-star sword sect high-ups any stronger, it would still be impossible to investigate who killed him. So, even if he really was killed by Duanling Tian here today, he would have died for nothing. "You still have 5 breaths worth of time." Duanling Tian's gaze descended onto the eyes of the Migres Peak disciple that were struck with panic, and a bloodthirsty coldness appeared on the corners of his mouth. The sword in his hand matched him to draw a pattern with his sword, a pattern that was dazzling and magnificent. 3 more breaths. After another time of 2 breaths, Duanling Tian's voice went slightly colder. The sword in his hand slightly rose up, as if he would attack at any moment. "I'll speak. I'll speak." Finally, the Migres Peak disciple was unable to endure the mental pressure imposed on him by Duanling Tian, and had a face full of terror as he said with an incomparably panicked tone, deeply afraid that Duanling Tian's sword would ruthlessly descend upon him if he was slow. "Speak." Duanling Tian looked at the Migres Peak disciple and said in a cold voice, "If I notice you lying, then don't blame me for being merciless." "I don't dare. I don't dare. I absolutely don't dare lie." The Migres Peak disciple was shocked to the point he was slightly unable to speak properly, and after he caught his breath, he continued, "It's Elder Zhaolin who asked me to monitor your tracks, and so long as I saw you appear in Migres Peak, I should report to him at the first possible moment. Besides that, he also said that if I'm able to find out about your place of cultivation, then he'll bestow an extra 10,000 gold to me." "Zhaolin?" Duanling Tian's face sank. He never expected that it was Zhaolin who was behind this again, that Zhaolin had repeatedly sent people to deal with him for the sake of a fictitious cultivation method, but in the end went for wool but came home shorn. Now, Zhaolin actually hadn't given up yet. "Duanling Tian, I've spoken of everything you wanted to know. Let me go." The Migres Peak disciple looked at Duanling Tian's hesitant expression and was slightly struck with panic, deeply afraid that Duanling Tian would go back on his word. Duanling Tian raised his leg and swept the Migres Peak disciple with his cold and indifferent gaze. "You better not tell that Zhaolin of what happened today. Or else." "I won't. I surely won't." The Migres Peak disciple swore solemnly. Scram. Duanling Tian's tone was calm as he said cold and indifferently. Yes, yes. The Migres Peak disciple hurriedly nodded, then crawled up before fleeing in a sorry state, and before long he disappeared before Duanling Tian's eyes. After seeing the Migres Peak disciple leaving, Duanling Tian moved back and forth between the small mountain paths, then finally ascended the peak of the mountain before returning to the stalactite cave. Duanling Tian's gaze was cold and indifferent as he sat cross-legged on the stone platform. That Zhao Lin actually still hasn't given up on the thoughts of seizing my cultivation method. Now that I've revealed a strength capable of annihilating a 6th-level origin core stage martial artist, even 6th-level origin core stage outer court disciples ought to not dare help him. Looks like he intends to investigate my tracks, then make a move himself. Duanling Tian guessed Zhao Lin's intentions. At the same time, he had a slight lingering fear in his heart. Luckily, there was that Migres Peak disciple today. Otherwise, he wouldn't know that Zhao Lin was still targeting him. He could imagine how, under the circumstances, that he wasn't on guard in the slightest. If Zhao Lin secretly followed him, once he entered a place that was devoid of people, he would surely be unable to flee death. He was convinced that facing the temptation of the fictitious Muscle Meridian Rebirth Scroll, Zhao Lin would be ruthless towards him without a doubt. Unfortunately, Xiong Quan isn't by my side. The strongest method in my possession, the Blaze inscription, is unable to deal with him. Duanling Tian's face slightly sank as he took a deep breath. Looks like I have to be extremely careful when I move about within the 7-star sword sect in the future. Otherwise, once I allow that Zhao Lin to find an opportunity, I would die without a doubt. Under his serious mood, Duanling Tian withdrew and consumed an origin-strengthening pill, then closed his eyes to start cultivating. 9 Dragons War Sovereign Technique, WYRM Python Form. Duanling Tian knew very well that the true way of kings was to have his own strength being sufficiently strong. If he was a void-prying stage martial artist as well now, why would he have to be afraid of Zhao Lin? Cultivate. Cultivate. The hot blood in Duanling Tian's body completely boiled, and the origin energy in his body violently roiled as well. His cultivation was advancing with an extremely swift pace. With this speed of cultivation, he was convinced that it wouldn't be long before he could smoothly break through to the 6th level of the origin core stage. Migres Peak, in a gorge that was adequately brightened by ray of sunlight. What? He's appeared? Zhao Lin asked indifferently as he looked at the Migres Peak disciple that entered with haste. Yes, Elder Zhao Lin. He returned from Dubhe Peak. The Migres Peak disciple hurriedly nodded. What? You didn't follow him? If you can investigate his place of cultivation, I will bestow 10,000 gold to you. Zhao Lin glanced deeply at the Migres Peak disciple, seeming to be tempting him. 10,000 gold? The Migres Peak disciple couldn't refrain from cursing in his heart when he heard Zhao Lin. Just for the sake of you 10,000 gold, I nearly lost my life. Luckily that Duanling Tian didn't take further action, otherwise, I would have been killed because of you. However, this Migres Peak disciple was still calm on the surface and laughed bitterly. Elder Zhao Lin, I want your 10,000 gold as well, but I'm completely unable to follow him. Zhao Lin nodded and didn't think it to be strange. As far as he was concerned, even he was once thrown off while following Duanling Tian, let alone a 3rd-level origin core stage outer court disciple. Are you sure he returned to Migres Peak? Zhao Lin confirmed a step further. I'm sure. The Migres Peak disciple hurriedly nodded and said in affirmation, You continue helping me keep an eye out for him. Come report to me right away if he leaves Migres Peak. This is what you deserve. Zhao Lin nodded, then raised his hand to pass 1,000 gold to the Migres Peak disciple. Thank you, Elder Zhao Lin. The Migres Peak disciple hurriedly expressed his gratitude and didn't mention a word of Duanling Tian catching him. Because he knew that once he mentioned it, not only would he offend Duanling Tian, but he wouldn't even be able to obtain this 1,000 gold. Do things for me in the future, and I won't treat you unfairly. Zhao Lin nodded, then waved his hand. Leave. Yes. The Migres Peak disciple hurriedly left, and secretly wiped off some cold sweat and heaved a sigh of relief. There were two great clans within Black Bamboo City, and they balanced each other out to control a third of all businesses within Black Bamboo City. As for the other two-thirds of businesses, they were instead controlled by the Seven-Star Sword sect. The Sher clan was one of the two great clans of Black Bamboo City. Outside the Sher clan estate, a figure that was like wind flashed swiftly, desiring to enter the Sher clan gate. Who? The faces of the two guards at the Sher clan gate went grim and hurriedly obstructed the figure. Bang! Bang! Two loud sounds echoed out, and the two guards were kicked flying to knock on the gate. Right when they stood up in panic and intended to call for help, they inadvertently clearly saw the appearance of the young man with a frosty expression that stood at gate, and the panic and rage on their faces vanished. Replacing it was respect. Eldest young master. The two guards bowed and addressed him respectfully. You two are really competent, even daring to obstruct this young master. The young man's features were distorted and hideous, and his triangular eyes revealed traces of a gloomy aura. If Duanling Tian was here, he would surely recognize him with a glance. This young man was precisely the young man who dashed like the wind, and Duanling Tian encountered on the road to Dubhe Peak after returning to the Seven-Star Sword sect from the primeval forest. Elder young master, spare us, we didn't know it was you. The two guards hurriedly kneeled on the floor and begged for mercy in panic. Their faces were filled with anxiety, as if this young man was a dreadful monster. Enough. I don't have the time to fuss about it with the two of you today. Let me ask you too, has the young miss returned? After I returned to the Seven-Star Sword sect, I didn't see her, and the gorge she usually lives in has been vacant for a long time. Even the azure stone tablet outside the gorge was shattered. As he finished speaking, the young man frowned and was vaguely worried. Unexpectedly, the two guards had bitter smiled on their faces when they heard the young man. Has something happened to the young miss? Speak. The young man's face went grim, and a bad premonition arose in his heart. Elder young master, young miss has... Her dantian was crippled by someone. One of the guards smiled bitterly as he spoke. What? The young man's body trembled, and his triangular eyes emitted a gloomy cold light. Who? Who did it? Who the heck was it? Actually daring to cripple my... Sure house, sister. No matter who it is, I will make him die. I will make him die a graveless death. Duanling Tian didn't know how long he'd cultivated, and only until the medicinal effect of the origin-strengthening pill was completely absorbed did he slowly open his eyes and wake up. Who? Duanling Tian spat out a mouthful of foul air and glanced at the cold stalactite cave, then shook his head before walking out with large strides. I wonder how those two little fellows are now. Duanling Tian stood atop the tilted tree and enjoyed the baptism of morning dew, and his gaze passed through the mist and cloud in the sky to gaze at the direction of the primeval forest. His heart was always slightly not at ease due to the two little pythons. I'll go see little Fei and Ku Air. Little Fei ought to have broken through. After returning to his sense, the corners of Duanling Tian's mouth curled into a smile, and after he used his sharp spiritual force to sense the mountain peak for a while, he leaped up, then walked down the Migres Peak. In next to no time, he once again arrived at the vast platform that the trade hall was located on. He'd only just arrived nearby the trade hall when he noticed a few gazes descending onto him, seeming to intentionally focus on him. Himph! A cold smile appeared on the corners of Duanling Tian's mouth. If he didn't guess wrongly, these people ought to be people that Outer Court Elder, Zhao Lin, ordered to monitor him. However, he didn't mind, as all these people posed no threat to him. Suddenly, seeming to have noticed something, Duanling Tian's gaze descended into the distance. Now, a young man stood there and was looking at Duanling Tian with a complicated gaze. Lu Yu? Duanling Tian recognized this young man with a glance. It was precisely the outer court disciple that obstructed him nearby the trade hall and desired to help Zhao Lin forcefully seize that fictitious muscle meridian rebirth scroll in his possession. This Lu Yu was a 5th-level origin core stage outer court disciple. He still remembered that at that time, he straightforwardly asked to battle Lu Yu on the life and death arena when he was faced with Lu Yu who obstructed his way, and in the end, Lu Yu chose to shrink back. Duanling Tian glanced deeply at Lu Yu, then turned around to walk towards the chain bridge and left with large strides. Since the beginning till the end, he didn't have the intention to pay any attention to Lu Yu. Lu Yu stood on the spot and gazed at Duanling Tian, who slowly went off into the distance. A bitter smile appeared on the corners of his mouth, and his legs were like they were filled with lead, unable to move for an extremely long time. Luckily, I didn't agree to his life and death arena invitation that day. Otherwise, I would die for sure. In these few days, he dreamt back to that day many times, and in those dreams, Lu Yu would dream the scene of Duanling Tian inviting him to battle on the life and death arena. Every time, he would be scared awake. Then his body would be covered in cold sweat. When he recalled his choice that day, only now did he realize how wise his choice was. Duanling Tian was even able to kill a 6th-level Origin Core Stage Outer Court disciple, let alone he who is only a 5th-level Origin Core Stage Outer Court disciple. He could imagine how if he had ascended to the life and death arena with Duanling Tian that day, he would surely die without a doubt. Duanling Tian was too terrifying. The few Migres Peak disciples that watched Duanling Tian leave gathered together. That Duanling Tian had gone on the chain bridge. Who's going to follow him? One of the Migres Peak disciples asked in a low voice. For a moment, besides one of them being able to maintain his composure, the other few Migres Peak disciples all lowered their heads. Duanling Tian was an existence that was capable of killing a 6th-level Origin Core Stage Outer Court disciple. They didn't dare take the risk to follow him. I'll go. Before long, the Migres Peak disciple with a composed expression spoke out to offer his service. Duanling Tian had only just passed the chain bridge when he noticed a tail behind him. It's him again. Duanling Tian's sharp, spiritual force allowed him to notice this person at the first possible moment, and it was precisely that Migres Peak disciple that followed him the last time and was uncovered by him. Duanling Tian's eyes became cold and fierce. This Migres Peak disciple was actually still working for Xiaolin? Moreover, he still dares follow me? Duanling Tian arrived at Dubhe Peak in next to no time, and wound around Dubhe Peak before quickly entering into a remote place. Right when Duanling Tian prepared to conceal himself nearby and intended to play the same trick again to draw the Migres Peak disciple out. Duanling Tian, I know you noticed me. The Migres Peak disciple walked forward a few steps, then said in a low voice, I don't have any other intentions for following you. I just want to warn you that Elder Xiaolin has found another few people and wants us to cooperate to track you. The other few people have gone to notify Elder Xiaolin. Before long, Elder Xiaolin will come to Dubhe Peak. Take care. Duanling Tian walked out slightly surprised, then looked at the Migres Peak disciple. Why are you helping me? The Migres Peak disciple was slightly embarrassed. You could have killed me yesterday, but you didn't. I owe you my life. Duanling Tian glanced deeply at the Migres Peak disciple. What's your name? Huangji. The Migres Peak disciple hurriedly replied. He didn't dare be slow. Whoosh. Duanling Tian raised his hand, and 10,000 gold appeared on his hand. Huangji, I presume you're helping Xiaolin do things for the sake of money. Now, I'll give you 10,000 gold. In the future, if that Xiaolin wants to follow me, then bring him to take a good circle around 7-Star Sword Sect. Give him a line of hope, then make him come back empty-handed. As he spoke to this point, a trace of an evil smile appeared on the corners of Duanling Tian's mouth. Huangji happily received the 10,000 gold and hurriedly agreed. Since he'd gotten back his life from under the hands of Duanling Tian, resentment towards Zhao Lin had arose in his heart. Now, he had an opportunity to make Zhao Lin suffer, and he even can obtain so much gold, so he naturally wouldn't miss the opportunity. I hope you don't disappoint me. Or else. Now, Duanling Tian was akin to giving Huangji a piece of candy to eat, then giving Huangji a slap, and his tone was filled with a threatening intention. Don't worry, I'll surely do this thing well, and won't disappoint you. Huangji swore with all sincerity. Go. Duanling Tian waved his head, and he left after Huangji left. In next to no time, he'd arrived at the chain bridge that led to Alcade Peak, and then arrived at Alcade Peak. When Duan Ling Tian once again arrived at Elder Bai's residence, he saw a young woman with a delicate and pretty appearance. He'd met this young woman twice. The first time was before the outer court disciples test. He'd seen this woman following behind Elder Bai. The second time was at Alcade Peak. At that time, she was following behind Elder Bai as well, and seemed to be a disciple of Elder Bai's called Zhuqing. She could be considered to be Li Fei's senior sister. Senior sister Zhuqing. Duan Ling Tian lightly smiled as he greeted the woman. Since she was Little Fei's senior sister, then she was naturally his senior sister as well. Duan Ling Tian. A smile appeared on Zhuqing's face when she saw Duan Ling Tian. You came to look for junior sister, right? Yes. Duan Ling Tian nodded with a light smile. I'll go get her. Zhuqing turned around and left, and it wasn't long before she once again returned, this time with a young woman that had an extremely beautiful appearance that could be called peerless. The woman had a face like an angel, body like a demon, and caused anyone who glanced over to be unable to refrain from having their imaginations go wild, having a desire to push her down and ravage her. Scoundrel! The woman saw Duan Ling Tian, and her watery, beautiful eyes lit up, then threw herself towards Duan Ling Tian. Duan Ling Tian only felt a fragrant wind assail his nostrils, and softness entered his embrace. He slightly smiled as he took the woman that threw herself at him into his arms. Little Fei, it has been nearly 3 months since we've seen each other. Li Fei lightly nodded and buried her head in Duan Ling Tian's strong chest, unwilling to raise her head for a long time. Duan Ling Tian stretched out his hand to stroke Li Fei's smooth back, and traces of a warm smile appeared on his face. Zhuqing glanced at Li Fei with admiration when she saw this scene, then turned and left. She knew that this moment only belonged to this pair of little lovers. She felt happy for her junior sister, as if a woman was able to find a man like Duan Ling Tian in their lifetime, then they wouldn't have lived in vain. For a moment, only Duan Ling Tian and Li Fei, who quietly embraced each other, remained within the entire vast gorge. Little Fei, Elder Bai isn't here, right? Duan Ling Tian's mouth nestled up to Li Fei's earlobe and lightly blew upon them. Li Fei's delicate figure trembled, and seeming to have realized something, she lightly shook her head. Master had something to do and went out. Duan Ling Tian's lower regions went hot when he heard Li Fei, and he breathed heavily as he extended his hand to hold Li Fei up in his arms, then directly rushed into the wooden house that Li Fei stayed in. The young man and woman, who hadn't seen each other a long time, claimed each other to their heart's content. After the storm stopped, Duan Ling Tian embraced Li Fei, who had a satisfied expression, and lay on his shoulder. Little Fei, when I came the last time, Elder Bai said you were at the critical juncture of breaking through. You seem to have broken through? The angelic face of Li Fei, who had a face full of happiness, now went rosy, and she lightly nodded. Yes, I've broken through. Have you seen Ku-er lately? Duan Ling Tian thought of the delicate and touching woman that always stayed by his side, and his voice was gentle like water. Little sister Ku-er followed the peak master and went for a distant travel. She came to look for me, and we both went to Migres Peak, but no Migres Peak disciple knows where you live. So, she left with her disappointment. Li Fei extended her jade-like hand and placed her slender and smooth finger on Duan Ling Tian's chest, then lightly moved her finger around. Duan Ling Tian nodded. Ku-er had the protection of the Alcade Peak's peak master by her side, so he wasn't worried of Ku-er's safety. Li Fei looked curiously at Duan Ling Tian. Scoundrel, where do you actually live? I and Ku-er asked tens of Migres Peak disciples, but there actually isn't a single person who knows where you ordinarily stay. Duan Ling Tian shook his head and smiled. Not to mention Migres Peak disciples, even the peak master of Migres Peak, or the sect master of the 7-star sword sect, it would be impossible for them to know the place I'm staying at. Li Fei's beautiful face had a sense of curiosity when she heard Duan Ling Tian. Duan Ling Tian naturally didn't hide anything from Li Fei, and slowly spoke of the matter of discovering the stalactite cave that day. So it turns out that the 10,000-year stalactite milk you gave me and little sister Ku-er comes from there. Scoundrel, your luck is really too good, right? Even that sort of place could be found by you. If the 7-star sword sect higher-ups were to know of this matter, wouldn't they be angered to death by you? Li Fei couldn't refrain from sighing with emotion, and as she finished, her peerlessly beautiful face had a slight smile. Yeah, my luck isn't bad. Duan Ling Tian nodded, and when he spoke of the stalactite cave, he couldn't help but think of the two little pythons. He wondered where they were now, and what they were doing. Scoundrel, what are you thinking of? So deeply absorbed in it. Li Fei noticed Duan Ling Tian's unnatural expression and asked with a wondering expression. Her tone seemed to have concern mixed within. It's nothing. I just suddenly thought of something. Duan Ling Tian shook his head and didn't tell Li Fei about the disappearance of the two little pythons. He didn't want Li Fei to be worried like him. Duan Ling Tian and Li Fei chatted, and unknowingly, they chatted about the outer court martial competition 3 months from now. Scoundrel, I heard the outer court martial competition's rules have been changed. Li Fei suddenly said to Duan Ling Tian. Rules have been changed? What rules have been changed? Duan Ling Tian was stupefied and asked. I heard from Master that when all is said and done, the change of the rules this time is because of you. As she spoke up to hear, Li Fei rolled her eyes at Duan Ling Tian. Although she knew her man's ability was great, but when she heard her man was able to kill even a 6th-level Origin Core stage outer court disciple, she couldn't help but be shocked in her heart. If Duan Ling Tian used an offense inscription, she wouldn't feel it to be strange. But the problem was, Duan Ling Tian didn't use an offense inscription from the beginning until the end, and completely used his true strength to kill his opponent. Because of me? What Li Fei said caused Duan Ling Tian to be extremely puzzled. What has the 7-star sword sect outer court martial competition changing rules have to do with him? Yes. Li Fei nodded, then looked at Duan Ling Tian with a wondering gaze, and didn't continue beating around the bush and directly said, I heard from Master that since the news of you killing the Fecta Peak's 6th-level Origin Core stage outer court disciple, Xiao Ying, was spread out, besides out Alcade Peaks and your Migres Peaks Peak Masters, the Peak Masters of the other 4 Great Sword Peaks specially started a meeting of the 6 peaks last month. The content of the meeting was targeted towards the outer court martial competition 3 months from now. In the past outer court martial competitions, outer court disciples must have entered the 7-star sword sect for less than 3 years to participate. But this time, the peak masters of the 6 peaks instead decided to remove this limitation. This time, so long as one is an outer court disciple, anyone from the 6 peaks of the 7-star sword sect are able to participate in the outer court martial competition. Li Fei finished in a single breath. Duan Ling Tian's brows knit. He'd never imagined that killing Xiaoying would cause such a chain reaction. Is there any need to go to such lengths? Duan Ling Tian shook his head and smiled. He never imagined that he had such great face as to be able to make the peak masters of the 6 peaks of 7-star sword sect to specially hold a meeting for him. Of course, Duan Ling Tian was able to guess the intentions of the peak masters of the 6 great sword peaks in doing this. It was none other than thinking if they didn't change the rules, the outer court martial competition this time would be without suspense, as he, Duan Ling Tian, would surely become the first place in the outer court martial competition. They're precisely afraid of you obtaining the first place, so they intentionally tried to obstruct you. Li Fei grunted in a low voice and had a displeased expression. All right, this is nothing to be unhappy about. They did this because they don't hope for the first place of the outer court martial competition to be known already before the martial competition has even begun. If it's really like this, then the confidence of the other outer court disciples would surely take a blow. Duan Ling Tian laughed. He was completely able to understand the intentions of the peak masters of the 6 great sword peaks. Still laughing? If it's really like this, then at that time, there will surely be some 7th-level Origin Core stage outer court disciples that would be participating. During the outer court martial competition, you can't use any external sources of strength besides spirit weapons. In other words, your inscriptions can't be used. Li Fei looked at Duan Ling Tian, seeming to be slightly unhappy. In that way, you'll be unable to obtain first place. Li Fei was extremely unhappy in her heart towards the first place that originally ought to be Duan Ling Tian's being deprived from him like this. In her heart, the man of her, Li Fei, was always the most outstanding. Can't use inscriptions? Duan Ling Tian was slightly surprised, but with a quick thought, he came to an understanding. Inscriptions were after all not similar to spirit weapons, as to a certain extent, the existence of inscriptions did indeed affect the fairness of the outer court martial competition. What? Little Fei, you're so not confident of your man? Duan Ling Tian's mischievously placed his hand on the little girl's delicate body that didn't have a bit of excess flesh and felt her up. The little girl's delicate body trembled, and her cheeks blushed rosy. Duan Ling Tian's breathing became hurried when he saw this, and once again turned over on top of her and galloped to his heart's content. Duan Ling Tian only left after being intimate with her for an entire day. A house of pleasures, a tomb of heroes. Our forefathers didn't lie. Duan Ling Tian sighed emotionally in his heart when he left the Alcade Peak, as although he'd been intimate with Li Fei for the entire day, but as far as he was concerned, it only seemed like an instant. Duan Ling Tian shook his head and his mind cleared slightly, then he stepped onto the chain bridge to return to the main peak, Dubhe Peak. The sun had already set in the west when Duan Ling Tian arrived at the stone platform which the chain bridge that led to Migres Peak was located, and he noticed that many Migres Peak disciples were stepping onto the chain bridge to head towards Migres Peak. Hemph! A cold snort sounded out nearby. Duan Ling Tian turned over to gaze over, and only now did he notice the Migres Peak outer court elder, Zhao Lin, on the stone platform, staring at him with a gloomy expression. Meanwhile, Duan Ling Tian also noticed Huang Ji standing nearby and was winking at him. Duan Ling Tian snickered in his heart. Looks like Huang Ji really did take Zhao Lin to go around the seven-star sword sect the entire day. Seeing Zhao Lin's exasperated appearance, Duan Ling Tian suddenly felt that spending that 10,000 gold was worth it. Elder Zhao Lin, it's been a long time. Duan Ling Tian stood in the stream of people that flowed ceaselessly and looked at Zhao Lin as he greeted him with a light smile, as if he was greeting an old friend. Zhao Lin paid no attention to Duan Ling Tian, and his expression was as unsightly could be. Perhaps, as far as he was concerned, the only reason he came back empty-handed today was because of Duan Ling Tian being too cunning, causing him to have no tracks to find. He didn't suspect Huang Ji who led the way. Duan Ling Tian shrugged when he saw Zhao Lin having no intention of responding to him, and the corners of his mouth curled into a provoking smile as he deeply glanced at Zhao Lin before stepping onto the chain bridge and heading towards Migres Peak. There were too many people here currently, so he wasn't worried that Zhao Lin would make a move against him. In next to no time, Duan Ling Tian noticed Zhao Lin following him from behind. He didn't pay any attention. Relying on his counter-tracking methods, it would be extremely easy if he wanted to escape Zhao Lin's pursuit. After Duan Ling Tian returned to Migres Peak, he wound a few circles around the trade hall that streams of people surged through, and successfully threw off Zhao Lin, then swaggered off back to the peak of Migres Peak and returned to the stalactite cave. Within the trade hall, after noticing Duan Ling Tian's tracks vanishing and searching for another half an hour without gain, Zhao Lin's face was incomparably gloomy. Duan Ling Tian, I'll find a chance sooner or later. You just wait. His wait was a wait of an entire 3 months. Alioth Peak. On the chain bridge, a young man with a gloomy expression walked swiftly into the Alioth Peak platform. This young man had an extremely special appearance. His features were distorted and hideous, and his pair of triangular eyes seemed to be always flickering with a gloomy sheen. He stood there, and his entire person seemed like a venomous snake that was waiting for a chance to swallow one up. However, when the young man passed them, the groups of Alioth Peak disciples all respectfully greeted him. Senior Brother Sure How. Senior Brother Sure How. Senior Brother Sure How. At the same time that these Alioth Peak disciples greeted him, expressions of respect and fear appeared on their faces. They were clear in their hearts that this young man with an appearance that was intolerable to the eye was in existence with an extremely formidable strength. He was also a famous person of their Alioth Peak, and even was the disciple that was publicly acknowledged by most disciples as the #1 disciple in the outer court of the 7-star sword sect. Sure How. Senior Brother Sure How's expression seems to be slightly unsightly. Isn't his expression always like this? I don't see any difference. Take a careful look again. Also, looks at his eyes. Don't they have rage mixed within? I wonder who offended him. It really is so. Two Alioth Peak disciples stood at the side and looked at Shur Hao walk to Alioth Peak from afar as they whispered in discussion. Shur Hao. Outside the Alioth Peak Trade Hall, a figure walked like the wind and arrived near the chain bridge in the blink of an eye to stand before Shur Hao. This was a robust middle-aged man with a thick build, and his eyes were radiating vigor. Elder Zhongbing. Shur Hao lowered his arrogant head before this robust middle-aged man. Shur Hao, there's something I want to tell you. The outer court martial competition 3 months from now doesn't impose the restriction of only allowing outer court disciples who have entered the 7-star sword sect for less than 3 years to participate. So long as one is an outer court disciple, one can participate. You can also participate. Zhongbing, the outer court elder of Alioth Peak, smiled as he said to Shur Hao, "This time, my Alioth Peak will be relying on you." As far as he was concerned, with Shur Hao's strength, taking the first place in the outer court martial competition 3 months from now was something that was without any suspense if nothing unexpected happened. What's going on? Shur Hao was slightly absent-minded earlier, but now when he heard Zhongbing, his spirit was roused. The rules of the outer court martial competition always had restrictions. Why were changes made suddenly this time? It was difficult for him to understand. This has to be told starting from an outer court disciple of Migrez Peak. When Zhongbing spoke up to hear, a trace of envy flashed within his eyes. 3 months ago, a black horse appeared within the batch of new outer court disciples that our 7-star sword sect recruited. That's a young man around the age of 20, and he later went to Migrez Peak. He hadn't come to Migrez Peak for long when he killed 2 4th-level Origin Core Stage Outer Court disciples in the Migrez Peak's life and death arena. The 2 Outer Court disciples were both Migrez Peak disciples. They both joined forces to deal with that young man, but the result was they were killed by the young man in a single move. The natural talent of this young man is simply shocking. The luck of the Migrez Peak is really good, actually able to obtain such a monstrous Outer Court disciple. Shur Hao, what's wrong? Why is your expression so unsightly? Zhongbing talked for a long time, and in the end he noticed Shur Hao's face sank suddenly. Shur Hao's originally distorted and hideous features now seemed to have completely entangled together. It looked extremely terrifying. Elder Zhongbing, you said that young man entered the 7-star sword sect 3 months ago? Finally, Shur Hao spoke with a voice that had a sense of coldness mixed within. Yeah. What's wrong? Zhongbing noticed that Shur Hao's expression was off and asked slightly curiously. Around 20 and killed 2 4th-level Origin Core Stage disciples? How's his cultivation? Shur Hao took a deep breath and asked. Seems to be at the 5th level of the Origin Core Stage. Zhongbing sighed. He didn't only kill 2 4th-level Origin Core Stage Outer Court disciples. Even a 6th-level Origin Core Stage disciple of the Fecta Peak was killed by him. What? Shur Hao pupils constricted and has an astonished expression. Elder Zhongbing, didn't you say he's only at the 5th level of the Origin Core Stage? He is at the 5th level of the Origin Core Stage, but he did indeed kill a 6th-level Origin Core Stage Outer Court disciple. You ought to have heard of that 6th-level Origin Core Stage Outer Court disciple. It's the Fecta Peak's Xiao Ying. Zhongbing slowly said. Even now when he mentioned this matter, his heart couldn't help but surge. He even felt that he might be dreaming. Xiao Ying. Shur Hao had naturally heard of Xiao Ying and knew that Xiao Ying could be considered as outstanding amongst the Fecta Peak Outer Court disciples. Moreover, he was supposedly about to break through to the 7th level of the Origin Core Stage soon and would become a 7-star sword sect Inner Court disciple sooner or later. Could it be that Xiao Ying didn't use a spirit sword, whereas that 5th-level Origin Core Stage Outer Court disciple used a spirit sword? Shur Hao asked in a low voice. It was difficult for him to imagine that if it wasn't like this, how could a 5th-level Origin Core Stage martial artist be able to kill a 6th-level Origin Core Stage martial artist? No. Xiao Ying used a grade 7 spirit sword and fought with his full strength. As for that 5th-level Origin Core Stage Outer Court disciple, He used a grade 7 spirit sword as well. Allegedly, the disparity of strength between the two of them was extremely large during that battle, a difference of the strength of over 10 ancient mammoths. But at the critical juncture, that 5th-level origin core stage outer court disciple instead shattered the bones of Xiao Ying's entire body with a single finger strike. I wonder what martial skill he used. As he spoke up to hear, Zhong Bing, this existence at the void-prying stage, couldn't help but feel a chill run down his spine. As far as he was concerned, that 5th-level origin core stage outer court disciple of Migres Peak was too strange. Could he have used an offensive inscription to kill Xiaoying? Shihao frowned and was slightly not daring to believe it. A mere martial skill was so heaven-defying? Even if it was an Earth-rank martial skill, it still might not be so heaven-defying, right? Moreover, unless it was a void-prying stage martial artist that had comprehended force, otherwise, it was utterly impossible to cultivate Earth-rank martial skills. As for the heaven-rank martial skills of legend, the required conditions are even harsher. So, the martial skills that an origin core stage martial artist was able to cultivate was at most a profound rank martial skill. But would there be such a strange and terrifying martial skill amongst the high-grade profound rank martial skills? He was extremely doubtful in his heart. Absolutely not. Zhong Bing shook his head. After the incident, some Fekta Peak outer court elders had inspected Xiao Ying's corpse and confirmed that Xiao Ying's injuries were absolutely not caused from offensive inscriptions. The bones of that Xiao Ying's body were completely shattered by origin energy. It's difficult to imagine what martial skill that was. Around 20, even able to kill a 6th-level origin core stage martial artist? Shihao took a deep breath. His triangular eyes flickered with an awe-inspiring cold light, and his heart trembled. It ought to be him. What? Shihao, you know him? Zhong Bing felt the killing intent emitted from Shihao's body and had a bewildered expression. Elder Zhong Bing, besides him, among the outer court disciples that had just entered 7-Star Sword Sect 3 months ago, are there any other existences that are around 20 and have stepped into the 4th level of the origin core stage or above? Shihao wanted to confirm a step further. I've never heard of it. Moreover, this is practically impossible. Our 7-Star Sword Sect being able to recruit such a genius martial artist can already be considered as luck. A genius martial artist like this isn't like cabbage sold in markets. Zhong Bing shook his head, and he felt sure Hao was thinking too wishfully. Elder Zhong Bing, what's the name of this Migres Peak outer court disciple? Shihao looked at Zhong Bing and asked. Duan Ling Tian, Zhong Bing said, as he deeply remembered this name the first time he heard it. Only because this was the name of a monstrous martial artist. Thank you, Elder Zhong Bing. Shihao nodded to Zhong Bing, then turned around and left, once again stepping onto the chain bridge, heading towards Dubhe Peak. Why does Shihao feel slightly strange after returning from his trip to train and gain experience? Zhong Bing gazed at Shihao's figure that disappeared into the distance and frowned. It's him. It's surely him. On the chain bridge, Shihao walked like the wind, and his triangular eyes flickered with dense killing intent. Duan Ling Tian, you actually dared cripple my sister's Dantian. I won't let you off. You will surely die. Under his extreme rage, Shihao's distorted and hideous face completely entangled together, causing some of the Alioth Peak disciples that passed by on the chain bridge to feel coldness arise from deep within their hearts from just a single glance at him, and they felt a chill run down their spines. Senior brother Shihao. When they greeted Shihao now, they were afraid to the point their voices trembled. Shihao didn't stop after he arrived at Dubhe Peak and stepped onto the chain bridge that headed to Migres Peak. He wanted to go to Migres Peak to drag out the person that crippled his sister, Yan's Dantian. He wanted to take revenge. He wanted to take revenge for the sister he doted on the most. Duan Ling Tian didn't know that not long after he returned from Alcade Peak, the entire Migres Peak was in an uproar. The Alioth Peak outer court disciple, Shihao, the #1 disciple in the 7-Star Sword Sect's outer court, spread word of wanting to battle Duan Ling Tian in the life and death arena, until only one party remained. Duan Ling Tian naturally didn't know all this. But, On the Migres Peak, after not seeing a trace of Duan Tian for a long time, even more people thought Duan Tian was afraid of Shi Hao and didn't dare reveal himself. Actually, it's normal that Duan Tian is afraid, as senior brother Shi Hao is the #1 disciple in our 7-star sword sect's outer court, and there's practically no outer court disciples that are capable of rivaling him. You're right. If I'm Duan Tian, I wouldn't reveal myself as well. Even though Duan Tian was able to kill the 6th level origin core stage Xiao Ying, but senior brother Shi Hao is in existence at the 7th level of the origin core stage. The 6th level of the origin core stage and the 7th level of the origin core stage is a divide, and there's a difference of an entire 20 ancient mammoths worth of strength amongst the two. Once it's amplified by a spirit sword, the difference is even larger. Could it be that Duan Tian is able to hide forever and not participate in the outer court martial competition 3 months from now? The prizes of the outer court martial competition are extremely generous. Allegedly this time, there's even an extremely valuable spirit fruit as the reward for the first place in the outer court martial competition. How do you know? Hee, I know a senior brother from the inner court. He had some relationship with an inner court elder, and it was he who told me. Along with the arrival of Shi Hao and the upcoming outer court martial competition, the entire Migres Peak was completely bustling. But even though Shi Hao had waited in Migres Peak for many days, but from beginning till the end, Duan Tian didn't appear, and in the end he temporarily left. However, before he left, he put down some harsh words. Duan Tian, I, Shi Hao, the brother of Shi Yin, swear to not stop until you die. Within the 7-star sword sect, if there's you then there's no me, and if there's me then there's no you. When Duan Tian received these words, it was already 3 months later. At the peak of Migres Peak, on the tilted tree that's concealed within the clouds and mist, a figure that was swift like the wind seemed to transform into an agile spirit serpent as it flashed out of the cave passage behind the tilted tree and firmly stood on the tilted tree. The tilted tree didn't even sway a bit. It's been 3 months. Duan Tian gazed past through the clouds and mist to gaze at the direction where the primeval forest was located. After a long time, he sighed. Those 2 little fellows actually still haven't returned. After returning from Alcade Peak the other time, Duan Tian had been cultivating within the stalactite cave ever since, and time slipped by. In the blink of an eye, it was already 3 months later. Swoosh! Duan Tian's figure moved, using the tilted tree to leap up to the peak of Migres Peak. That outer court martial competition ought to be starting soon, right? Duan Tian came down from the peak and quickly arrived at the vast platform that the trade hall was located on. As far as he was concerned, it would be easiest to obtain information of how the outer court martial competition's rules had changed in the trade hall that streams of people flowed through. But he'd only arrived nearby the trade hall when he noticed odd gazes coming from the crowd of Migres Peak disciples, all descending onto him in unison. Is there something on my face? Duan Tian couldn't help but be dazed when he saw this scene. Right when his heart was filled with questions, a figure walked towards him from afar. Duan Tian. He-chun? Duan Tian recognized this Migres Peak disciple. It was precisely who Li's friend, He-chun. Duan Tian, you finally appeared. I even thought that you'd hidden yourself and didn't intend to participate in the outer court martial competition this time. He-chun sized up Duan Tian for a while, then shook his head and smiled. Hide. Duan Tian was puzzled when he heard He-chun. What does He-chun mean by this? Hide from what? Huh? He-chun asked when he saw Duan Tian's stunned expression. Could it be that it wasn't because of hiding from that Shi Hao that you didn't reveal yourself for 3 months? Shi Hao. Duan Tian frowned. Who's that? I don't know him at all. He-chun was speechless. Are you sure you don't know him? It can't be. If you don't know him, then why did he spread word that he wanted to invite you to battle in the life and death arena? Invite me to battle in the life and death arena? Duan Tian's frown grew deeper. His heart lightly sank. Could it be something that outer court elder, Zhao Lin, did? Exactly. He came 3 months ago, and even stayed on our Migres Peak for some time. In the end, he left after being unable to wait for your arrival. After that, he successively came another few more times, and still you didn't arrive. All of us thought that you didn't appear because you were hiding from him. He-chun nodded, then slowly said, "Wait, you said earlier that he came? He isn't from our Migres peak?" Duan Ling Tian discerned some clues from He-chun's words. Could it be that he's an inner court disciple that Zhao Lin found? Duan Ling Tian, you've really never heard of him? He's sure how. He-chun's gaze was slightly strange, and he felt that Duan Ling Tian had entered the Seven-Star Sword Sect for nearly half a year in any case, but actually hasn't even heard of the #1 disciple in the Seven-Star Sword Sect's outer court, sure how. It was truly inconceivable. Is he very famous? Duan Ling Tian noticed He-chun's surprised expression and asked with a bewildered and dazed expression. Sure how? Not right. This name seemed like he'd heard it somewhere, but for a moment he was unable to recall it. Of course he's famous. He-chun discerned that Duan Ling Tian really hadn't heard of Sure How before and couldn't help but explain. Sure How, it's the disciple that's publicly acknowledged by most disciples as the #1 disciple in our Seven-Star Sword Sect's outer court. There's practically no one in the outer court disciples that is his match. #1 in the outer court? Duan Ling Tian's pupils constricted. He'd finally recalled it. He remembered that Shi Yin had once bawled before him when he crippled her Dantian that day. She said something about having a brother who was the #1 in the outer court. Moreover, her brother was in existence that was about to become an inner court disciple, a quasi-inner court disciple. Later on, Elder Bai had warned him that he should be careful of Shi Yan's brother Shi Hao. So it turned out to be that the person He-chun mentioned who wanted to ascend the life and death arena to battle him was precisely that Shi Hao, Shi Yan's brother. He-chun thought Duan Ling Tian was afraid when he saw Duan Ling Tian's expression that was ceaselessly changed, and hurriedly warned, Duan Ling Tian, if you don't have any urgent matters, then continue hiding. It probably wouldn't be long before that Shi Hao will know of the news that you appeared here, and at that time he will surely come find you at the first possible moment. Then let him come. Duan Ling Tian shrugged and had an indifferent expression, then looked at He-chun and asked with a light smile. He-chun, Hu Li ought to have returned already, right? Huh. He-chun saw Duan Ling Tian's indifferent expression and laughed bitterly. His only thought was that Duan Ling Tian was like a newborn calf that didn't fear a tiger. He asked me to tell you that in the future, he will let you see anew him. Besides that, the Hu clan he's from is at Clarity City. Duan Ling Tian nodded and remembered it in his heart. He was happy for Hu Li as Hu Li was able to be so optimistic. At least, Hu Li didn't sink into the shadows of the past. Duan Ling Tian, I think you should hide for a while. He-chun felt his scalp go slightly numb when he thought of Shi Hao. As far as he was concerned, the strength of Shi Hao was too formidable and was far from something Duan Ling Tian could go against. You can hide at the beginning, but you can't hide forever. Some things have to be faced. Duan Ling Tian shrugged and shook his head as he smiled. He-chun went silent. Right, He-chun. When is the outer court martial competition starting? Besides that, what do I have to do if I want to participate? Since He-chun happened to be here, Duan Ling Tian took the opportunity to ask. He left the stalactite cave this time precisely for the sake of the outer court martial competition this time. Not only did he want to participate in the outer court martial competition, he wanted to obtain the first place. This was the promise he made to Hu Li. A man's promise. The first round of the outer court martial competition is 3 days from now. So long as you're a Migres Peak disciples, you can participate in the first round of the outer court martial competition, and you don't have to do anything. At that time, people who want to participate can all gather at the Migres platform to receive their number token, then undergo elimination battles to decide on the strongest 10. He-chun said to Duan Ling Tian. But the outer court martial competition this time is different from the previous years, as if doesn't have restrictions like before. This time, many 7th level origin core stage outer court disciples will participate. Duan Ling Tian nodded. This was something he'd already heard from Li Fei earlier and was mentally prepared. 7th level origin core stage? So what? Since he'd promised Hu Li that he would seize the first place in the outer court martial competition, then he would surely do it. Duan Ling Tian's gaze was incomparably firm. He Chun, then I'll be returning first. See you in 3 days. Duan Ling Tian bid his farewells to He Chun, then turned around and left, disappearing before the eyes of all the Migres Peak disciples. Coming and going without a trace, elusive. It wasn't long before a figure that dashed like the wind arrived at Migres Peak, and under the guidance of some Migres Peak disciples, he found He Chun. You know Duan Ling Tian? The young man with a distorted and hideous expression sprung his triangular eyes wide open as he stared fixedly at He Chun. He Chun never imagined that Hao would actually find his place of cultivation, and the corners of his mouth curled into a bitter smile as he nodded. Take me to him. Hao's eyes flickered with a gloomy sheen, and his voice was cold as ice. I don't know where he cultivates. He Chun shook his head. Hao's face sank, and his triangular eyes stared at He Chun, and in the end noticed that He Chun seemed to not be lying. What did he look for you for? It was only a chance meeting. He asked me some things about the outer court martial competition, then left. He Chun didn't conceal anything. As far as he was concerned, there was no need to conceal this as all the Migres Peak disciples would know 3 days from now. In other words, he will participate in the outer court martial competition this time? Hao's triangular eyes shone, and the corner of his mouth curled into a cold smile that had a trace of gloominess, as if Duan Ling Tian was already within his grasp. Yes. He Chun nodded. This time he could be sure. He was able to discern that Duan Ling Tian appeared nearby the trade hall today, precisely to obtain information about the outer court martial competition. That's good. Hao's triangular eyes flickered with a cold light. He raised his hand to directly hit He Chun flying, and he only coldly snorted and left after he saw He Chun crash onto the ground. Pooh! He Chun won injured and spat out a mouthful of blood, and the corners of his mouth curled into a bitter smile. This Hao was as overbearing as the rumors said after all. 3 days later, the first round of the 7-star sword sect's outer court martial competition started. The outer courts of the 6 great sword peaks would decide on the 10 strongest outer court disciples today. Then they would participate in the second round of the outer court martial competition tomorrow. The second round of the outer court martial competition was the true outer court martial competition. Disciples that are outstanding in the second round of the outer court martial competition will be able to obtain generous prizes that was bestowed by the 7-star sword sect. This was the reason that caused all the outer court disciples to flock towards the outer court martial competition. Whoosh! On the peak of Migres Peak, a figure dashed like the wind, and in the blink of an eye, the figure flashed down to arrive nearby the trade hall. Where's the Migres platform? The person that come down from the peak was precisely Duan Ling Tian. Follow them. Duan Ling Tian, who didn't know the location of the first round of the outer court martial competition, merged into the stream of people that were on the Migres Peak mountain path. Instantly, some of the nearby Migres Peak disciples recognized Duan Ling Tian. It's Duan Ling Tian. Duan Ling Tian, you actually still dare to appear. Could it be that you aren't afraid of senior brother Hao? Yeah, Duan Ling Tian. If senior brother Hao knows that you've appeared, he would surely not let you off. A burst of similar words entered into Duan Ling Tian's ears. Duan Ling Tian only smiled indifferently towards this and paid no attention to it. His figure flashed, dashing like the wind as he flashed down the mountain while following along the stream of people. Before long, Duan Ling Tian passed the vast platform that the life and death arena was located on. Continue down. Finally, Duan Ling Tian arrived at the Migres platform. Duan Ling Tian's gaze flickered as he looked at this Migres platform that occupied an area far larger than the platform the life and death arena was on. This Migres platform is rather huge. The Migres platform was extremely large, and on it stood 10 spacious stone arenas. Any one of these stone arenas weren't inferior to the life and death arena. Based on Duan Ling Tian's guess, these stone arenas ought to be the combat rings that were used to carry out the elimination battles for the first round of the outer court martial competition. Before long, many outer court disciples had gathered on the Migres platform. These outer court disciples were brimming with vigor and rubbed their fists and palms together, wanting to become one of the 10 people that advance in the end, today. Only in this way would they have a chance to obtain the prizes bestowed by the 7-star sword sect. Duan Ling Tian stood there and naturally attracted many gazes. In Migres Peak, Duan Ling Tian was absolutely considered as a famous person currently, but amongst the people that looked at Duan Ling Tian, some of them had a trace of pleasure in Duan Ling Tian's misfortune mixed in their eyes. This Duan Ling Tian actually dares participate in the outer court martial competition. Even if he successfully advances, he would surely encounter senior brother Shi Hao in the end. Based on the hatred senior brother Shi Hao has towards him, even if he doesn't die, he will be crippled. If I was him, I'd surely not participate in the outer court martial competition this time. Yeah, what he should do now is hide and cultivate, and come out when his cultivation breaks through to the 7th level of the origin core stage. With his natural talent, it ought to not take him too long. At that time, senior brother Shi Hao might not be able to do anything to him. I really don't know what he is thinking. The crowd of Migres Peak disciples whispered amongst themselves. Duan Ling Tian could vaguely hear some of it, but he didn't pay any attention. Hide. If he did that, then he wasn't Duan Ling Tian. Duan Ling Tian. Before long, Duan Ling Tian saw He Chun had arrived. But he noticed that there was an injury on the corner of He Chun's mouth, and he frowned. He Chun, who injured you? It was Shi Hao. It's not a big deal. It's only a flesh injury. He Chun shook his head and smiled, with an indifferent expression. Shi Hao. Duan Ling Tian frowned, and felt it to be slightly strange. Why did he injure you? Do you have a dispute with him? He Chun shook his head. No. 3 days ago, some people saw me talking to you nearby the trade hall, and they told Shi Hao. Shi Hao found my place of cultivation and asked me about you. I told him about you participating in the outer court martial competition. I'm sorry. As he finished speaking, He Chun had a face full of an apologetic expression. It's only a small matter. Even if you didn't say so, he would know today. Duan Ling Tian lightly smiled and didn't mind. How about it? Do you have any confidence in advancing today? Don't kid around. I never had the intention of participating when I came here today, and I only came to cheer you on. But wanting to advance with your strength is extremely easy. He Chun's words were filled with confidence to Duan Ling Tian. It's senior brother He Dong. Right at this moment, a surprised voice sounded out, causing many Migres Peak disciples to turn and look. Duan Ling Tian looked over as well. He saw a young man around the age of 25, walking over swiftly from a side of the mountain path. All the Migres Peak disciples fervently greeted him everywhere he passed. Senior brother He Dong. Senior brother He Dong. Senior brother He Dong. After the young man walked into the Migres platform, he stood at the side and closed his eyes to rest his mind, ignoring everything in his surroundings.
Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, please like, share, and subscribe.